Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my No More Heroes 3 PC Carolina Reaper difficulty video walkthrough. This is the hardest difficulty available, and it is horrendously balanced, so I do not recommend playing this on a new game. However, you know the drill if you've seen my channel before. I will suffer and hopefully bring you some information that will make it easier for you to go through and have a bit more success. If you're new to No More Heroes like I am, this game is going to be quite the trip, and I've left in some of these sequences to give you an example of just how crazy this game can be. And at the very beginning here, we start with a tutorial and some comedy. No More Heroes is a series that I've wanted to play for a long time, but I could never really get opportunities to do so, because it was on the Wii for a while, a console I did not have, and then you could get it on the PlayStation 3, but I found it really difficult to actually get that. So it's always kind of been one of those pedestal games for me, where people have told me that it was really good, and it was a great action game, and I should play it, and then I never got the opportunity to do so. And then finally, with this one, I was hooked up by the developers. They gave me a key, and I'm going to be checking it out here and showing you this game, and it's wonderful. Kind of flights of fancy into just the absurd. And we're going to talk a lot about this game because it's about 3 hours and 20 minutes, this project. So if you want to get deep here, guys, and talk about some No More Heroes, now is the place to do so. But right here is an engagement against 3 bones. They are the standard enemy class. They have what looks like a spinning top, which extends into somewhat of a lance, and they will joust you with it. This enemy has about 2 attacks. Another thing we're going to be talking about as well. But the framework of the game is quite simple. You're going to do the introduction, you're going to be introduced to the concept of a ranking system, and it's going to be our goal to get to the bottom of the ranking system and kill all the other assassins that are in our way. And in order for Travis to do this, he has to do these designated matches to prove his worth and acquire enough currency. And then once you've done that, you will then be invited into an encounter against whoever is holding the ranking, which is a boss fight, a boss sequence. And if you played the previous 2 games, none of this is news. This is kind of the framework of the whole series. This time we've just come in from a little bit of a different angle. And then here we have another tutorial explaining jumping attacks. So the first of the jumping attacks here is the jumping heavy attack, which the game tells you is a good tool to use to kind of separate enemies, to kind of crowd control a little bit. And I can definitely agree it can be used in that function, but one of the things to bear in mind is you get stuck in it for quite a long time, so the best thing to do is to dodge out of the end of it. And just bear in mind that there's an interesting relationship between Travis and locking on and movement in this game, which will take a while to get used to. I've been playing it a decent chunk of time now, so it doesn't really bother me too much anymore. But when I first started playing, I felt like the connection between moving freely and then locking on felt a little bit stilted and a little bit awkward. And I think that's just the series in many ways. You'll also notice that when you lock on as Travis, it doesn't seem like it's omnidirectional, it seems like it's still got just the 4 directions. So no matter where you put on the analog, he'll either dodge forward, dodge right, or dodge back. There doesn't seem to be any variations of that really happening. However, if you don't lock on, he'll dodge anywhere, of course. But it's showing you a ton of our existing abilities right now, which is we have the Death Glove with a single ability, which is the Death Kick. We have the full armor mode being teased, and then of course we have the wrestling moves, which you're going to be using primarily to deal damage and to get your battery back. For the people watching this and wondering what's going on with the combat is kind of unique and kind of strange, because you have light and you have heavy attacks. Light attacks are pretty good, but they don't stun as much, but you can recover out of them quickly and cancel them, whereas the heavy ones, they hit a wider vicinity of enemies, they do a decent chunk more damage, and they're difficult to be cancelled out of / recovered from. And on this difficulty, guys, you're going to die in anything from 1 to 2 hits. And it doesn't matter how long you've been fighting for, and the very start is by far the most difficult part of the game, because you have to take on one of the most boring bosses in the history of the human race, and you have to do so without making any mistakes, really, because if you do, you'll be reset and you'll have to do it all over again. And I fight this boss for about 10 minutes. And I have a big bone of contention against this game and its balance when it comes to this, as we take on, I think it's Mr. Blackhole here. So this guy, for all intents and purposes, is a tutorial boss. But he has 2 moves, effectively. And then he goes into a second phase, and I suppose you could argue that he gets another move or 2. But you should never have to hit a boss this many times when the boss doesn't really have anything to offer you. And because we're so early on and we don't have any abilities, we have no true capacity to deal damage or to make this any quicker than what you're about to witness. So the strategy is simple. You're going to engage him until he starts doing a move, and then you're going to interrupt it with the Death Glove. And then you're going to engage him, and he's probably going to disappear. When he disappears, he can do one of 2 things. He can try to punch you, or he can try to zoom towards you. If you play Devil May Cry 3 and you beat that first mission, you're going to have no problems with this particular technique, because you have to try hard to get hit by it. And then it ends in him falling from the sky. When he falls from the sky, you want to hit him with a nice big barrage of moves, and again, watch him for doing a move, and then interrupt it with the Death Glove, or get the slash there for the roulette. If you get the roulette slash, you'll stun him, you can then proceed onwards, and you can hope that you get Mustang mode, you can hope that you get... Maybe you can throw him if you get that infinite throw mode. That throw frenzy mode. On New Game Plus, you can charge your beam katana here and stop him as he moves between portals. It does a lot of damage and it shuts down this entire phase. You can also stick the time slow beneath his feet, you can stick the death rain on him, and then you can proceed to beat him up and get almost twice the damage I can do here. You can also come here with more chips, more upgrades, things of that nature, and it will really alleviate a lot of the troubles you're going to witness here. But if you do this game from New Game, and there are achievements for beating this difficulty, this is an unavoidable, arduous engagement. And I want to ask you now, guys, because you've seen me cover a lot of games, you've seen me play action games, you've seen me play pretty much everything that is of this ilk. I think I've pretty much got a decent representation of the genre on my channel. Do you think that this is acceptable in 2022? And in the game's defense, it did come out the year previous, but this is the 3rd game in a series that is known for being like crazy and stylistic and being an action game where you fight bosses. It's essentially a boss rush with a little flair in the middle. To me, I just don't understand how you can get away with releasing a boss that at most has 4 moves and none of them are threatening. Like, it might be a rare case of, because we know the genre so well, it's not something that's going to stimulate us the same. But I feel like you could come from a Mario game, and you could isolate this enemy and deal with it, I'm not going to say rather quickly, because nothing in this difficulty is rather quick at all. The entire difficulty is just kind of a test of patience and a test of fortitude. And if you want to see some fail videos, if you're watching this and thinking, well, you know, you seem to be doing it perfectly every time, I am not, guys. As always, this is a segmented run of a walkthrough. I've just edited together all the successful attempts, so it makes it a bit more cohesive for you to watch. I'm not the best No More Heroes player in the world, in fact I'm quite weak at this game because I don't understand it yet. But I'm trying my best to learn, and I'm trying my best to figure out some cool things that can hopefully help you have a better time with the game. But it just seems kind of strange that it would be so limited to me, and you would be here so long. And it leads me to the notion of, I've spoke about this a lot, I've talked a lot on the internet because I have thousands of videos of me doing so. But do you ever think there's a good reason or a good excuse for you to attack a boss and see no damage off the life bar? And I can understand games where bosses have massive life bars so the damage you do is really small. I still think that that's a terrible design because it makes the player feel somewhat just completely worthless. And anything that removes the power fantasy of the player is something that's overall psychologically going to hurt their enjoyment in what they're doing. And I always bring it back to something known as the no upgrade runs / pain plus runs of God of War. God of War Ragnarok is about to come out and be whatever the hell that's going to be, but in the old games, the games that I love, there was a challenge you could do to make them a little bit more difficult because God of War was quite notorious for being easy. You can block 90% of the game and everything else you can roll away from. You know, it's not the most difficult game between the grabbing, between the crowd control, between the knocks and the repeated flinches and the looping. But the game is awesome, so people came up with these interesting strategies to make the game more interesting so that they could have more fun with it and make it more difficult. And one of the things they did, of course, was no upgrades. And then beyond that, they did Pain Plus, which ended up being no upgrades, no damage, like none of the cooler features, none of the chests, limiting yourself in every conceivable way, so you're just basic Kratos getting in there and seeing what you can do. And it's a very, very cool challenger, and it's something I've wanted to bring to the channel for a while. But there's a couple of parts of those games that they're going to take a long time, and it's one of those things where you know no one's going to watch them, and can you justify the time they take to do? Especially when you've got to pay the bills, as DSP would say. Got to pay my bills! But in God of War, the bosses don't have HP bars, outside of the first game, where you can see like that brass on the bull, and outside of some very gimmicky moments. Fundamentally, the bosses don't give you any visual that you are winning, or indeed close to winning. And it becomes very apparent on those no upgrade runs and those challenge runs on God of War 2. When you're attacking a boss, you just kind of... You're hoping eventually you're going to see the big icon in the quick time event and you're going to win. And then you're hoping that you don't drop it, because if you do, you'll have to do it again, probably. And when you do that, there's a double-sided sword. You don't know how close you are to winning, but at the same time, you don't know how shit you are and how terrible your damage is. So it enables you to continue psychologically attacking, because you never know, the next string of combos might be the one that wins it. Now you juxtapose it with this, guys, where you can see how much damage I'm not doing. How's it make you feel? When you hit this guy with your heavy attacks and you do a full string of 5 hits, and it doesn't even take a square off? There's a disconnect between how you're supposed to feel as a player and how this is supposed to feel as a difficulty. And you know me, I talk about difficulty more than almost anything else. The difficulty is something that is truly sacred, and something that is... It's borderline spiritual for me, because I'm so fascinated in its philosophy. I'm so fascinated in the machinations and the disagreements and the belief systems that some people have and other people don't share. I love how subjective difficulty is. I love how interesting trying to make it more objective and more appealing and more accessible. And I think the pursuit of that is really admirable. But then we come up against something like this. And I did this fight for about 2 hours. And it's just because it's very easy to take damage, and I wanted to not take damage. So you'll fight him for about 9 minutes, and then you'll get hit by something really sloppy because you kind of get bored, or you get lazy, or complacent, or whatever ends up happening. You're not doing what you need to do, and thus you take a hit, and thus I retried a few times, and I don't recommend you do that, guys. I recommend you just take the hit and maybe use some healing items. Especially if you just want to get through the difficulty, the best piece of advice I can give you is grind in the virtual machine, grind the bosses to not only get enough currency to upgrade your character, but to get the better chips, and spam items. Those are the 2 best advices I can give to anybody wanting to get through this game without learning it. However, if you're a little bit more stubborn than that, if you want to get in here and prove this game wrong and prove that you're better, then you're going to have to engage with it. And there'll come a time where no matter what you're doing, you will have to put in more time than you'd like. This whole project cost me about 10 hours of my life clock to do the recording. So from start to finish, all of the recording assets ranked up to about 10 hours. And it did not feel like that, guys. It felt like it was about 4 million, because most of the engagements are a bit like this. This one, however, is the longest. Every fight after this, because we get access to better Death Glove moves, because we get access to chips, because we can upgrade, every fight after this one is going to be slightly more merciful when it comes to how long you have to do it. But it's interesting, isn't it? I like the idea of this fight. I don't inherently like any of the life bars and the balances of the enemies, but I don't think the bosses are bad, and I don't think what they have you doing is necessarily bad. I just think everything together makes it feel a little bit uninspired and lame. So the problem, as you can see here, is that these portals that he's generated hurt you. They also have a vacuum, so if you go near them, you sluice into them and go down a drain. And when you do that, it dumps you out and it hurts you. You can attack this boss into those vacuums, and then you can no longer engage him, because if you do, you'll get sucked in. And they're everywhere, and they don't seem to go away, and there might be a way to get rid of them, which I never figured out, because there are some interesting features like that with this game. But use this as an opportunity to practice. Practice getting comfortable with Travis's movement. Practice getting comfortable transitioning from a running attack or a running jumping attack into a standard combo. Practice watching your cooldowns on your Death Glove. Practice transitioning between the heavy and the light attacks. Watch the boss to see what he's doing and understand his movements. Also get good at getting ready to charge your battery and doing it at the right time. And we get the Mustang mode here right at the end. We could have done with this an hour ago, and then we finish him off. And that is the first of our targets claimed, and we get to see this horrendous font that only looks good on the kill screen with the red and black, and every other instance of it is absolutely atrocious. And the first boss is down. Congratulations if you made it this far. He is going to put a lot of people off who start this on a new game. And now we get the final phase, which is us in the robot, which probably has a name, but I do not know. I'm assuming, sorry, that the No More Heroes fans know all the names. I don't know if this is just a Damon Ex Machina reference, because there's a couple of those in the game. But the idea here is, if you change your reticle on this enemy, there'll be a part that starts doing those green triangles and the red triangles, and at the bottom of the screen there's a bar that says destroy, and that will build up. You want to fill that bar and fire it off, and if you get an opportunity and see a weakness, you want to use your laser on it like I did just then, and do a lot of damage. Those robot sequences, as cool as they look and as awesome as they should be, they're kind of shitty. And they're kind of awkward, and they're not immediately apparent on what you're doing or if you're being effective, but the more you play, the more you'll understand them. And then we get the awesome results screen, which just looks beautiful and reminds me of the menu from Kingdom Hearts. But there we go, guys. All of that, and we only got an S rank because we're garbage. Best rank in the game was SS rank. I'm definitely going to do some talking about that because I have a plan for another project after this with this game. Especially if you guys like it, which I don't think anybody's going to give a shit about this, truthfully. I think it's a bit too niche, but if you're listening and you're still here, hopefully you do. But there was ranking 10. But there's a difficulty after this called Death Difficulty, which is boss exclusive and only in that virtual reality simulator. And I want to do the bosses on that, probably go for no damage. I might even go for best rank, but it all depends on how much fun I'm having, because truth be told, guys, this was a really frustrating project for all the wrong reasons. But this is the first engagement in the game, a real engagement. This is a designated battle up against some bones, and we also have a diversity. So, this enemy, just like the one in the tutorial, only has 2 attacks, and the enemy behind it is not a diversity, sorry. This is I think he's got a chest hole. This guy fires things at you. So the enemy in the background here is a big pain in the ass. He's going to put mines everywhere, and he's going to shoot you with a directional laser. And then he's going to teleport if you get too close to him. You want to keep an eye on that guy, because he can be a real problem. But the bones are the standard enemy, and you want to get used to beating these guys up. And we got the no? Thought we got Mustang mode then. But as you see here, if you walk near those green orbs, they will detonate by themselves, but be very careful, they will one-hit kill you. If you get unlucky, if you're really on them. And his gun will track you really well, but if you run around him, it can't hit you, so you can save yourself the time of dodging or jumping or doing anything stupid. And some of the battery right now is kind of not going my way. One of the things I really don't like about the combat in this game is the cancelability is very, very delayed and very slow on the throws. I've just come off a walkthrough for things like Spider-Man and things. By the way, guys, this is a bug for high frame rates, I believe. So if you ever see me sliding like that, it's because Travis has to get around an enemy and the collision won't let me do it. It's just because I'm playing it on 240 FPS. And that's the best thing about the PC port. The PC port's kind of dog shit, but the frame rate is as high as you can get it, which is really nice. These are diversities. These are a group of slot machines that are some of the most frustrating enemies in the game. They have a boatload of HP, and they have a bunch of moves that will just absolutely deny you. And the idea here is to try and keep them stunned and kill them. But they can charge you, they can fire this wall which hurts you, and you bounce off it if you attack it. And the biggest fear right now is that anybody behind me attacks me, because this enemy has the ability to fire this, it's a spiked ball, and it's a bomb. And if they stick it on you, you have to be in an animation when it goes off or you will die. And you can't seem to block it in a conventional manner. And I don't know if you shake your beam sword, if it knocks it off you or something. There might be a gimmick to get it off your body, but I didn't find it when I was playing. So what I would do is I would wait for it to start blinking, and I would do the same thing I do in Ninja Gaiden with the incendiary shurikens. I would wait just as it's about to detonate, and then I'd do a death kick, and I'd use the iframes to eat the move. And eat the detonation. But if you can keep an aggressive style on these enemies, they can't really do too much. And then you can proceed to get your roulette slashes, and then hopefully you'll get a big stun into maybe some throws or maybe a Mustang mode. This game has a disproportionate amount of random variables that do nothing but hurt the player, and I don't really understand it, because Sometimes they reward you massively, sometimes they do absolutely nothing, and the only thing that's consistent is it has nothing to do with you. And as a player who likes to learn games, somebody that likes to really delve in, really get down deep into the mechanics and feel like I'm improving and feel like I'm not the player that I started the game as, random variables are the enemy. Because they're not consistent, they're not recreatable, and they don't do well for guides. And I say this because you're going to come across it yourself when I'm going to fight a boss, guys, when I have the robot suit and I go into Mustang mode and I decimate the boss and it dies really quickly. And then you're going to play, you're not going to get the robot suit because the game's not going to give it you. You're not going to get Mustang mode because the game's not going to give it you. And you're going to get everything that you don't see me get and feel like the guide didn't help. And as much as all video games are random, and sometimes the randomness enables us to play them and experience them for longer, every so often it would be nice to get a little consistency. But this game does not pull any punches when it comes to its combat. Like right now I've got that bomb on me, do you see it, guys? It's going to start blinking, 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 blinking. And then eventually, there it is. Boom. That's what happens when you guard it. At this moment in the recording, I don't think I knew about using the iframe from the kick, so you'll have to forgive that. But as an example of what it can cost you. And the thing that makes it worse is the enemies shoot you off screen, so you can get hit by enemies when you can't see them. You can get hit by all kinds of weird actions in this game. And when you're doing the throw animation, you're not invincible. Well, technically you are invincible, but you have a hitbox. So when you're doing the slide around to throw somebody, this enemy can stick a bomb on you while you're doing that, and there's nothing you can do because it's a canned animation. And on PC, if you play at high frames, because that bug happens so frequently where Travis just like bleeds into the wall for no reason, while you're doing that, they can stack bombs on you. And if you come out of it and you don't have a solution, you'll just die because 2 of those bombs will kill you. Sometimes 1's killed me, I don't know what changes, but something changed. But this should be the final hit. And the guide is going to have no nonsense, as you've probably already noticed. We're going to do designated fights, boss fights, and nothing else. I will not show you me driving around, getting money. I'll not show you me driving to these locations. I'm just going to show you what the fights are. And then this one is a full face with 2 bones. So the guy there wearing the armor is one of the more difficult enemies in the game for probably a lot of players, but I think he's the best enemy in the game. And the reason I like him is because he attacks. A lot of enemies in this game like to stand around doing absolutely nothing, but this dude is not like that. However, his HP is so high that it's kind of a pain in the ass because this guy is going to constantly be attacking you the whole time, and he does not die. And because we don't have the full access to the Death Glove because we haven't done the 3rd boss, we are currently in a state where we really have to do way more work than I'd like to be doing right now to win. And you might be watching this and thinking, I don't know if I want to do this, and I wouldn't blame you, because if I get hit properly right now, I'm dead, and I have to do everything again. And that's what these designated fights are like. They're these little pockets of intense challenge. Luckily, the bones don't do any damage. Do you see him do his little poke? He hit me for no damage at all. But some of those other guys, like the dude we just killed, the full face guy who we knocked away, sorry, if he comes down in any of his big moves, it's good night. He hits you like an absolute truck. And then he's got a boatload of life, so you've got to be really careful when you stun him because he'll just attack through what you're doing. But the idea again with the combat in this game, in the previous No More Heroes, there was this high-low mix-up that was going on and people guarded and you could guard break. And I think that sounds way better than what's in this game personally. But they seem to have simplified it in many elements, taking away the ability to do the punches, taking away the ability to do the high-low options, and instead you have quick and slow, and then you have the same kind of game you played before where you beat up on these dudes just enough to get them into a stun state to then use the throws to replenish your battery. And you'll notice too, when I was comboing that full face then, a couple of stars fell out of him. I didn't know what that was when I was first playing, but I later realised if you go to throw people after you see those stars fall out of them, even though they're not stunned, you will throw them. It seems to be some kind of like hidden reward. You do not get the fancy throw animation, you get a very specific, like, it's like a German suplex, isn't he, that he does, and there's no camera change, there's no dynamics, it's just a throw that gets done. And it might be a good idea to use it, but I'm not entirely certain if it's optimum, because I don't know enough. And that leads us to, I believe this guy's called Leo Pardon. This is arguably one of the most annoying enemies in the game. In a game that only has 8 enemies, this one is king for being a douche. And the idea is very simple, but it's compounded by massive life bars, and that's the whole difficulty. Carolina Reaper is literally Skyrim if you just crank the slider up to the end, and that's its idea of balancing, that's its idea of design. And I really don't understand it personally, because I came from games that their harder difficulties were immaculately designed, and you could see that they really put some time into them. And it's funny too, because I put up a fail video, and there was someone in the comments that said, oh yeah, this is just like Devil May Cry 5, where you have to beat up on bosses for 20 minutes. And I don't know a single Devil May Cry 5 player that has to hit a boss for longer than like 2 minutes, because it's just not the same. And the problem with a comment like that is, the player who left it does not know how to play Devil May Cry 5. Because if you're fighting for that long, you're doing something wrong. Whereas here, I am playing as optimally as you can play in many ways. Outside of being an absolute No More Heroes veteran, like, the gameplay you're going to witness here is going to be me beating the living piss out of things repeatedly in loops of damage, and they just won't die. There's a difference between you playing suboptimally and the game being just horrendously designed. And I think that's what that person didn't quite understand. Like, this boss does not have... I say a boss, he's an enemy. This enemy does not have much going for him. He can fire a box at you. He can fire those circles. He can summon those eggs. He can do that weird side laser that one-hit kills. And I think that's it. Oh, and he can also do that shield there that tanks a hit. Which, you need to be careful here, guys. I've not mentioned that. There are these wonderful moments in No More Heroes 3 where the enemies do perfect counters to Death Glove techniques and just kill you instantly. And another thing, you see that move just then? Something you need to know as soon as possible is dodging to get the perfect dodge and do that, like, shadow step or whatever it's called. You have to dodge early to do that. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves in the whole game too. Because I came from Bayonetta, guys. Most of you know this, but if you're new, my action game of choice was Bayonetta. Because I thought it took what Devil May Cry did really well, and it added a sense of scale, and it added a sense of touching on all the other areas that Devil May Cry seemed to have moved away from in favours of the combo-centric stuff. You know, it had the big bosses, it had the bombastic arenas, it had all kinds of crazy things going on. And I really enjoyed that. And the thing I enjoyed the most was the slow motion. I thought Witch Time was superb. So, when you put a lot of time into Bayonetta 1, and you get good at Witch Time and doing the bat within and playing as Jean and doing the tighter frame window, you get a really good understanding of the mastered version of this mechanic. Bayonetta, for me, mastered the slow motion dodge. I think it does it the best of any game that has it, by far. So when I play this, and this game doesn't have it mastered, to me it is glaringly obvious and almost like condescendingly frustrating. Because Bayonetta came out a long time ago, you know? Here we go, and it perfected it. And I can't understand not learning from your peers, not learning from the best in class. And there's a few things that make it really, really tedious. The first one is, if you dodge late, and you visually dodge it, you still get hit. Because this game is built on a system where dodging early seems to be more effective than dodging late, even though the late dodge looks like the superior dodge, you will find yourself dodging in this game, and it will be really close to the iframes in all the other action games you could name, but in this game it doesn't work. Ooh, additionally guys, I didn't know what throw crazy meant until somebody on my stream mentioned, I forget who it was. I thought it just made your throws really strong, because it seemed like they did double damage, but it turns out you can just throw people without them being stunned, and you can loop the throws. I didn't know that, guys, so learn from my mistakes. But this enemy here is called the Triple Put, and it's a really frustrating enemy because it has 2 attacks. It has a move where it flips backwards and it charges at you, that does a lot of damage, and then it has a spin that it just did just then. And that's it. And it has 200 million HP. So get this, guys, right? An enemy that does nothing but lets you beat it up, and then occasionally hops around backwards and flies towards you in a ground slide, or does a twirl, and that's it. You have to hit him 50 times, he has to hit you once or twice, depending on how lucky you get. And he just doesn't die. And it's one of those weird things where when I was first playing the game, guys, I got the game early because the devs hooked me up, which was really kind of them. A huge thank you for that. And I was playing it, and because I was new to the franchise, I do the same thing. I don't know if you do the same thing, where I'm always willing to say that I'm doing it wrong. I try my best to be like, oh, this is my problem. This is my fault. I need to fix this, you know. I need to be better. I need to be more efficient. I need to figure it out. It's a puzzle. But this whole game feels like a puzzle. And then when I put those videos up... Oh, wow, this is Gold Joe, by the way. This is probably the best fight in the game. This is a really, really interesting gimmick fight. And I kind of love it, but again, the problems that we're facing is this boss has a ludicrous amount of HP, and he will kill you in 1 to 2 engagements. And he has this gimmicky move at the end, where he uses the polarity of magnets to push and pull you away. If he pulls you into him, you're dead. If he pushes you towards the wall, you are dead. And you can fight this guy for like 7 straight minutes, so be very careful. But luckily, between the previous mission and this mission, I now have a couple of damage upgrades on my character, so we're going to do a little bit more damage than we were doing before, but it's still not going to be anything too crazy. And the idea here, guys, is you can pretty much block everything this boss does, and if you're not confident with the dodges, you want to block it. However, if you can get that perfect dodge off it, you want to hold block, look at it, get the perfect dodge, and then engage him. And what I do is I wait for him to do a move, and then I will hit him with the death kick to hit him into the wall. And if you knock him into the wall, he will bounce off it into a down state, so then you can start attacking him and looping him. And he's going to do these magnetized moves. He's either going to do positive, or he's going to do negative. And if he does positive... If you go towards I think it's the same magnet as him, because, you know, 2 magnets that pull together will then repel, if they're the same polarity, it'll push him away from you. So if you walk up to him while you have the same one as his move, you'll push him into the wall, and then he'll rebound off the wall and you can beat him up. And the whole fight is you seeing what magnet he chooses, going into that version and then pushing him away, and then at the end... You don't want to do that. You want to stick to opposite to stay alive. But I've got a couple of tips if you're struggling. Oh, I got an invincibility frame there as well, thanks to the roulette, which was nice. But I really struggled with the end of this fight, because I kept getting killed by that push-pull move he does. And because it took so long to get to it, I was getting really frustrated. And what I would do is I would save my robot mode. I would save perhaps a push, or even a death kick. And as soon as I saw him doing that big one, I would just pull it out and hit him with that to shut him down and stop it, and then beat him up a ton and hopefully kill him. And that's what I would recommend, guys. If you're struggling and you can't do the battery stuff, save your death kicks for when he's in the batteries, and then just shut him down. Because the death kick is really unique in a few ways in that it teleports you to the opponent. It doesn't always work and it's not always good, but it's definitely worth your while if you can get used to doing it. And it can lead to some really fun stuff too if you know what you're doing. But right then, I didn't really like what he was doing, so I'm going to use the robot to shut it down. And I'm going to fire on the lock-ons, it's going to knock him down, and then I'm going to go and beat him up on the ground. And we've got the stun above his head, so we're going to do the full string into the throw, replenish the battery. And then after this, you're going to get another guaranteed Oki on him, so you want to attack him as he stands up, and I have a death kick, so I'm going to do a full Y combo into a death kick potentially. Oh no, there's the lasers, we're all good. What does he do? There's the ground slams. Be very careful dodging this move. This move, if you dodge it incorrectly, is a 1 to 2 hit kill, and it's got a huge hitbox too. So be really careful, but we get the roulette slash. We beat him up from behind, we got the stun, he's going to bounce off the wall now. I've still got the kick just in case. And here's he is drawing in more of the lasers. That's his move. We get the perfect dodge off the move. I'm going to use it as an opportunity to charge my weapon because this mechanic's fucking stupid and should be deleted. Which, how do you feel about the battery, guys? I feel like the battery was a good idea on the Wii. But I feel like now that this game's moved away from the Wii and the Wii's moved away from being a Wii, that we should kind of all agree that it was gimmicky as fuck and nobody wants it. I don't want to charge my fucking sword. I just don't want to do it. Like, Give me some kind of rev system that lets me charge my sword by being a good player, instead of having to stand around and waggle a fucking analog like a moron. Most frustrating mechanic ever made. It's so needless too. It just feels stilted and awkward and disconnected like most of this game does. But there we go, we do the throw, that should be it, but it's not because his HP's so big. And we kick him into the wall, and you have to kill him with a cut or it doesn't work. And there you go. Gold Joe is no more. I really like this fight, but again, the balance of Calorina... That's a cool word, isn't it? I just made a word up. But the balance of the Carolina Reaper mode it's just not there. And I'd love to go in and tweak this difficulty and make it a lot more fun for people, because I just don't think it'd take much. I feel like the foundations of No More Heroes 3 are going to be fun if you like No More Heroes. And if you're new, you're going to play it, it's going to be ridiculous, you're going to have a good time, you're going to move on, aren't you? You're not going to spend too much time. But if you really want to play the game and you really want to invest and you really want to get in there and have a greater understanding, you're going to come to understand that they just really didn't seem to care. And I don't understand the point in a difficulty that is, as some people have defended, designed for New Game Plus. Because you can say many games are designed for New Game Plus, but you can still do them in New Game. And there's a difference between still doing them and doing them like convincingly and in a fun way. But here is our second ice battle. This is the Ice Shaver, I think he's called. This is interesting, this. Do you see those glowing pink orbs that are on his, like, I don't know what you would call those, proboscises or something? They're on his, like, little mustaches. They're in his mouth and they're on his mustaches. And all you want to do here, guys, is slowly rotate to left or right, strafing to dodge his barrages, and then build up as much of a lock as you can, and then if you want, use the laser to then go in and clean up what you didn't hit. And how this works is actually an interesting and elegant kind of balance here. Your dodging ability, your boost, is your laser. So if you dodge a lot and you boost a lot, you can't use the laser, but if you have a full bar, you can then use it to fire your ultimate weapon. And there's an interesting dance between being, you know, less mobile but more deadly, and then picking your moments. And the cool thing about this laser is when you do this, you're invincible, it seems like. However, coming into it and coming out of it might be a bit suspicious, but when you're in it there, you can use it to kind of go through things and then just finish bosses off really quickly. But I don't know about you guys, I love the look of the robot and I love the ideas of these moments, but I think the HUD is awful. I think the HP looks awful. I don't really understand why it's not immediately apparent what you're doing. And I feel like these ideas are the kind of ideas that in theory should be really, really good, but kind of fall down by not being great. Like, conceptually, a robot battle in space against a huge alien is awesome. I've played Wonderful 101 where they did this. It was awesome, you know. Gimmicky gameplay, done well, done in a really responsive and satisfying way. And then you come to some of these and they almost feel like puzzles. They feel like you're doing a pipe water puzzle in Bioshock because you're just not engaging with the game. I love this screen, by the way. This is the only instance of that font that I don't despise, and I think it really works here. I love that little fill as well on the drums. It's got those nice rolls into the cymbals. The music in this game is one of my favourite aspects of it too. It's really, really nice. But here we go. We've got 2 chest holes, and then we have a triple put. And this is going to be the full meat of the game, guys. The reason this walkthrough is 3 hours long is because the enemies, as you progress, seem to get more and more HP, and your damage really doesn't improve to anything that I think is all that impressive. So you're going to see me do the same things quite a lot. I'm going to try and isolate the one who is either the biggest threat or the easiest to neutralize, and then I'm going to string them into stuns, into throws, into glitches, and then we're going to capitalize on the death glove to get rid of everybody else. And to look at this, you might think, wow, there's only 3 enemies, how can this be hard? But because of how the game is, and because of how awkward all the systems engage with each other, it's really easy right now to just get blindsided and get fucked up. And I'm getting a bit lucky here because it seems like the enemies are... There he is, shooting me off screen, you see him? As soon as I was about to say that they've pacified a little bit, they don't. You just have something between you and them and they stop attacking normally. And then I come out into Mustang mode and I trade with one of those mines from off camera. So, it's messy. I think that's the best way to categorize No More Heroes' style and its combat, is it's messy. There's a lot of fun there, there's a lot of enjoyment, there's stuff to learn, and I'm enjoying my time with the game. But the one thing I can convey at the start of this walkthrough that would save you the heartache that I felt when I was getting into the series is that this is not the same class as the action games you love. This is a game that you play for its style and for its like genre convention defining. I say defining, it's really distracting, and it just smashes the defined conventions. It does what you expect, and then it goes off on its own and does what you don't expect. And its greatest strength is it being silly. But the moment you try to push it, the moment you try to test it and see what it's really made of, it falls apart. And there's a ton of fun still to be had, but I would not do in this game the type of things I would have done if it would have been closer to something that I like a lot more than this. We have a new enemy here as well. This enemy is called a Minoru. So we have 2 bones and a Minoru. This guy is kind of unique. He walks around with this piston arm that fires outwards and then comes back inwards and 2 hits you and kills you instantly. He also has the ability to fire this ghoul from his face. It's kind of like a spirit worm that flies around, and if it grabs you, it stuns you. And then he has that spinning move just then, which is also a lot of damage if it hits you right. I got really lucky just then with it not hitting me too bad at all. And again, see how early my dodge was? God, I fucking hate that. And the second thing I hate about the dodge, which I haven't told you but I need to because it's very important, is when you do a perfect dodge in this series, you can still trade with the bosses and the enemies that are around you because it doesn't turn your hitbox off. And it makes you seemingly invincible to their attack, but it doesn't make you invincible to all attacks or the incoming next attack. So if a boss does a 3-hit combo and you get a dodge on the first hit, those next hits that are coming probably will hit you. And a lot of my mistakes in this game and a lot of my failures stemmed from this mechanic. And to me, it is the sign of people who do not know what they are doing when it comes to perfect dodges. It's just not the way it should be. This is not Third Strike. There's no reason to have to parry every goddamn hit, you know? If you want to parry every goddamn hit, go play Sekiro. But in a game such as this, when you do a precise dodge, you should be rewarded, and you should not have to worry coming out of it, because what's the point in rewarding you with a mix-up that you have to eat at the end of it, which essentially leads to failure? All you're doing then is doing a perfect dodge into disadvantage. And I don't want to talk about perfect dodges into disadvantage because it's one of my most hated... Watch this, by the way. That move is very dangerous. That was the first time I'd ever seen it, guys. I didn't know what he was doing. So I moved away from him to see what was going on, and he kind of hit scans you with his chest. So be very careful with that one. Learn from my mistakes. And now in this one, we have a triple put, along with 2 of the swordsmen. So this is going to be interesting. 2 full faces and 1 triple put. I really like these 2 guys because they are consistent dodgers and they are hyper aggressive. Again, the HP thresholds do not agree. But again here, be very careful with dodging. When you dodge these dudes' attacks, when you come out of that slow motion, you are going to be very vulnerable, and a lot of the times you just come out and get whacked. And I put 2 videos up on YouTube if you want to see some fails, guys. Two fail videos of me playing the game for a decent amount of time, doing okay and then losing. I had maybe 40 of those in the full project that I could have shared. Some of them absolutely heart-rendering, just horrendously obnoxious, borderline like suicidal garbage. That guy was blocking me then as well. I kind of miss the idea of having a guard break. I love guard breaks in games. I've still yet to see a game do it as well as God Hand, but that's because God Hand does it the best. But the dance of No More Heroes seems to be, from what I can gauge in this one, is that you want to obviously get your perfect dodges. You want to go in there and put on some pressure. You want to stun the enemy so you can get the throws to get your batteries back. And it seems to just all be about looping those principles. You know, get that slow motion, get those attacks, build that stun, get those throws, get that battery back, and then repeat. And that death kick, I need to warn you, because it's something that's going to happen. It's just an inevitability. The death kick is your best friend until it's your greatest enemy. and there's no middle ground. This move teleports and hits people and is really useful, has huge knockback, has huge knockdown, does good damage. It is a really, really cool move. But every so often, it locks onto thin air. Every so often, it locks onto people in states where you can't attack them, so it whiffs. And then there are these moments, as I mentioned briefly earlier, where you'll do them to an enemy, they'll do a perfect block on it, and then they'll blow you up in recovery. So they'll just kill you before you can get back into the fight. And it's kind of hard to explain unless you've seen it or unless you've felt it. But the idea is, engaging with a death kick is almost always a good idea, unless it's a certain enemy with a certain proclivity to doing something that's really bad. Any enemy that can block and have a programmed guard, not so much these guys, but for instance, you know the diversities, the slot machines? They can do a block, and when you come out of it, they might just put the projectile on you and you'll die. The Leopard guy, he has this wonderful ability to do a perfect block and then slash you with that weapon, and you can't recover in time, so you just die. You do that at the wrong time, and you've put yourself into an unescapable situation. And then there's a few other guys as well. There's a dude that walks around with a big axe, and he can just straight up auto-counter. So if you kick him, he takes no damage, he blocks it perfectly, and then he whacks you. And as long as you understand this, you'll be okay. Because you won't see the death kick having any of these awkward moments in this video, but it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. No More Heroes 3 is kind of one continuous series of awkward moments. And it might just be from the seams in the skybox to the motorcycle being an irritation, to trying to jump over a simple chest-high wall that you just can't do, to moments where the camera is so close to Travis you can't see all the environmental hazards the game expects you to dodge, to moments where you do something really, really well and then get punished anyway. Like just then, did you see that? That was a very good example of me almost instantly dying. I do a death kick on one enemy, and he's hitting me as I'm coming out of it, but luckily, the residual iframes saved my ass. And we need to play a drinking game here, guys. And this is going to be a rather subjective one. So every time we do a designated battle like this one, and you feel like it takes too long for me to win, in spite of beating the living shit out of everyone, I want you to take a drink, or take a shot, or whatever you want to do. You know, you can bite a banana if you're a health guy. Do what you want, but estimate it to take a little bit too long in your caliber, and then respond accordingly. And then at the end of the guide, if you're still alive or still conscious, I want you to tell me, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how pissed you were. Because I feel like everyone's going to be 10 after the first 5 chapters, pretty much. Because look at this. You know, I have fought against some of the most demanding enemies in video games. I've come up with strategies for some of the most ridiculous opponents. And I have an enemy that has 2 moves and stands there and lets you whack on him. And then when he does his spin move, I do a dodge early and I get rewarded with a perfect dodge even though he hasn't attacked yet. Ladies and gentlemen, No More Heroes 3. And my favourite part is the enemy diversity too. So this is the bone enemy that has a shoulder blade. Like a shoulder pauldron thing. Which is just a piece of armour on his chest, on his arm. You know? This enemy has the same moves. The only difference is visually, it has a piece of armour on its arm. This is not a new enemy. This does not count as enemy diversity. And there was a fellow in my stream before I went on holiday who said that this game has good enemy diversity. And I told this person that they were delusional because they are. I can't imagine anybody thinking a game that has 8 enemies when all you do is fight enemies in groups of 3 and then fight bosses in sequence. I can't imagine anybody thinking 8 enemies is enough. Like in this video at this moment in time, you're probably thinking right now that the diversity is not enough because you've seen me beat these guys up a bunch. I've only been playing for 50 minutes. And I counted the enemies. There are 8 if we don't go into palette swaps, and we're not counting palette swaps because that's just stupid. And then I went onto the Neo wiki because one of the criticisms of Neo is that it had low enemy diversity. There wasn't a lot of variety in enemies. And I went and I looked, and the first thing you notice on Neo is that it's got like 8 humanoids at the very beginning, and it's just a bunch of dudes with different hairstyles and different weapons. And they're technically palette swaps, so I'm not going to count them. But even then, there are more deviations of standard human enemies in Neo, between people with spears, people with axes, people with the different weapons in the game, and bows and archers and things, than this game has enemies in general. And then you get to the actually unique enemies, and there's a dozen of them. Like, think about it, you know? You could take the walls, you could take the kappas, you could take the umbrella geezers, you could take that ghost that wraps you in paper and slows you down with sloth, you know? You can take the... Who's the guy from the chest? Like, you know the mushroom dude? That, like, weird monster in the chest, the mimic? And that's not even mentioning people like the Cyclopses or the different yokais. There's dozens of them. That's not mentioning all the enemies in that game. When you really get into it, there's a surprising amount. And then DLC added even more, which we're not going to talk about DLC, but fundamentally, like, Neo is a game that was actually degraded in many ways on a critique that I always thought was poorly founded. I never thought that Neo had low enemy variation. I always liked the enemies. I thought it was a good amount, actually. Especially considering you needed to learn their patterns. But the defense I said to that person was, Dark Souls has more enemies in the Undead Burg than this game has in the entire game. And I hate to be that guy that brings everything back to Souls, because I'm actually quite a Souls hater right now. I spend more time saying, you know, Dark Souls ruined fucking everything than I do anything else, even though it's one of my all-time favourite games. But the point I'm trying to get at is, I don't understand a game that's all about combat like this one having such a small roster to fight. Especially when the enemies have 2 to 4 moves at most, and then you fight these bosses that are meant to be these highlights, these, you know, icing on the cakes, and then the bosses are almost just as simplistic and almost just as dull. And taken casually on one playthrough, I can imagine you'll have enough fun to not really notice that you're literally killing the same 5 dudes, and sometimes they have like a mustache. But I've beaten this game now 3 times, and I've done it. My first playthrough was a no upgrade run that I did on normal. Then I did a run on stream on the easiest difficulty to see what was going on, which gives you an auto shield, which is absurd, and the enemies don't die quicker, the enemies don't have lower HP, you still whack them for 200 years, like, the balance in this game is one of the worst I've ever seen. And then, of course, I've done this recording on the hardest difficulty, so I've experienced everything the game has to offer, balance-wise, difficulty-wise, combat-wise, and it just leaves me kind of cold in many ways, because there's just not enough. And what is here, I think is cool, and I think it's a good foundation. But you know when this game was held hostage by that Travis Strikes Again game, where Suda was like, buy that game and I might make a No More Heroes 3, and then that game came out and it was nothing to do with the series, it was like some text adventure that was 2D or something? Like, I can't imagine holding a sequel hostage, and then when you make it, you simplify the combat, you have 8 basic enemies, and bosses with 2 attacks that take 10 minutes to die. And you might think that I'm being a bit too harsh, you might think that I'm, you know, just, why can't you just play it and enjoy it? Well, I can't. Because I want it to be better than it is, you know. People think that when you critique a game, you do so because you're miserable, or you just want to whine, or you like the sound of your own voice, which I think a lot of people probably do. But for me, nobody wanted to like No More Heroes more than me. Because I've been waiting like 20 fucking years to play it. So when I got to it, I had pretty decent expectations. And then when you get right down to it, I think it's a disappointing series so far from what I've played. Let's go. And I see the same defenses of the series. Here's the 3rd boss, by the way, guys. I don't actually know this dude's name. A couple of things to bear in mind with this guy. He has some big telegraphed thrusts that are really good at getting your dodge off of, so use those. And then later on in the fight, he's going to want to separate, and he's going to want to clone himself. And what you want to do to that is, when you see him running away, he's going to do it, basically. So if you knock him over with the death push, or if you hit him with the death kick, you can reset him, and he'll probably attack you. And all you need to do, whenever he starts running away, if you use a death move on him, it will get his aggro again, and it will kind of supersede his programming, and you can beat this guy before he even separates if you're aggressive enough. I actually farmed this dude in the simulator a little bit, just to see what was going on. And turns out, he's one of my favourite bosses in the game, but again, he's got too much HP. And another thing I want you to do, guys, you might notice that at the end of the battles, I'm not leaving in the results screen. And you might be curious. It was my intention, guys, to leave those in. But what I ended up doing is, every time I got, I think, no damage, or every time I got the best rank, I left in the results screen. And then whenever I didn't, I trimmed it out. And what I want you to do, guys, this can be another drinking game if you're feeling particularly party going. I want you to watch the fights, and I want you to play along with me here. When I do a fight, guys, at the end, I want you to make an estimation on how you thought it went. And I want you to think, did I get the best rank, or did I not, right? Based on my performance. Was I using the moves? Was I quite quick? Was I absolutely decimating? Did it look stylish? In your mind, would you have given it a best rank? And then I want you to watch the end result and see whether or not I show the screen. If I don't show the screen, it means I probably got an A and I was as incredulous as you. And if I do get a rank, then all's gravy, baby. But I just want you to see how many times I no damage fights, decimate everybody, insult everybody involved, and then the game gives me a shit rank. And originally, I thought the rank was about the death glove using the moves. Because you get graded, it seems, on 3 things. You get graded on time, you get graded on damage, and you get graded on number of skills. And I can confirm, ladies and gentlemen, that damage helps, but doesn't really matter. If you do no damage, it's the safest thing for the best rank. I can also confirm number of skills is absolutely fucking pointless and doesn't help at all. Because the time it takes you to do a dozen skills, you've already lost the time bonus and you won't get the SS. The only measurement that seems to matter is time. If you can do something really quickly, and you can do it without taking damage, you will get the best rank. If you take no damage, do 50 skills, you will get a B. Guaranteed. Because the time seems to be all they give a shit about. And I think the ranking system is fucking garbage. I really don't like it. And it's funny too, because I came to this game with quite high expectations, as you can imagine. And it wasn't just in the game itself, it was in what I wanted to do to bring to YouTube. And I started off with the loftiest goals. I was going to do hardest difficulty, no damage, maybe no upgrades. And I was going to get the best rank. Because in my mind, if this game is as fun and as good as I'm hoping it's going to be, why would I not want to do that? You know? Make the sexiest project I can make that YouTube would love and you guys would fall in love with if you like the series. And then I started playing it, and then the balance of the game, even on normal, was so fucking sus that incrementally those standards just dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped. And there's a few reasons for this. The first one is frustration with balance. You know, balance is not there. I'm not going to bat on it too much. We've already spoke about that. The balance is really bad. You know it, I know it, everybody knows it. That one guy defending it on my stream probably thinks it's great, but he's delusional. And when the balance isn't there, it really puts me off, because it means that I'm going to have to work harder than I want to work. And when you do a challenge run, it shouldn't be work, it should be fun, you know? So the moment it starts being work, it makes you not want to do it. But there we go, that's the end of this, dude. And I don't think you'll see a cutscene here, because this one is unique. I won't say anymore, but there's the results screen, guys. Beautiful artwork again. Number of skills used, 19. Look at that, A rank. Absolute garbage. 72 damage taken, which is minimal. Minimal as hell. And I still don't get a good rank. Just get rabbed. But there goes the Black Knight direction, even though technically that's not him. But we move up to the next place, and then the next one's going to be Vanishing Point. But yeah, the first one was the balance. The balance was super brutal. The second was the incompetence in the mechanics. I'm not a big fan of getting punished because the game is not working very well. Ooh, here he is, guys. This is the dude that will auto-counter you. So you need to be careful with this man. He's real good. He's called Captain Treatment. He's probably my favourite enemy in the game, but you don't fight him enough to really learn him. So I don't know how to fight him, I don't know his moves, so I'm just going to shut him down with all the abilities, and he's not going to stand much of a chance. But this guy is the most intricate enemy in the game with the most moves. He's got about 5 or 6 moves, and all of them are super cool, and they're dangerous too. They kill you really quickly. I kind of wish this guy turned up more often just so I could get a better gauge on him. But I'm definitely going to put some more time into that monster just to have a bit more fun with the game. So when I say incompetence of mechanics, guys, I mean things like when you do the death kick and they auto-counter you and kill you. I mean when you try and do a perfect dodge and you trade with the attackers you go to punish, you know. I mean features such as that. I mean just the moments where the game is not working as it should work. Like the horrendous cancelability of the throw, where you go to do a throw at the end of a combo and you sit there for 200 years and Travis doesn't do it. Because it's like the buffer's just not hitting correctly and several other things. Here we go with throw mode. Have I realised yet that I can throw multiple times without having to stun? I have not. I still don't know about it, guys. Unfortunately. Or maybe I do. I should have thrown the other guy though, shouldn't I? No, I don't know. Do you see? Bless me. That's how green I was. And then the final thing was it's really difficult to retry in this game. Especially if you have my mentality and my lack of patience for retrying. So when you die in this game, you eat the retry screen, and then when you do the retry screen, it spins a roulette. This roulette spins, and it either steals your battery, or it retries. But most importantly, it wastes enough time so that I want to stop playing the game. And there is no way to quickly retry. You can't press start, retry, and immediately get back into the fight. You have to stand there, wait to die, then you have to wait for the roulette to turn up, then you have to wait for the roulette to spin, and then a lot of the times, if it steals your battery, which it does a lot, you start the fight with no battery, and when you try to get your battery back quickly at the start, you just get hit by something and have to reset again. So it got to the point sometimes where I would have to restart 3 times just to get in the fucking fight with a battery. And every time I got the one that stole the battery, I stood there and let them kill me again and retried again. And this might not sound like a big problem. This might sound like the type of thing that people like to blow up a lot on the internet, you know. But to me, this is huge because time is very precious. Time is valuable. And as much as I focus on this and I try to do this as best as I can't justify wasting time, you know. Time is money when you're a YouTuber, when you do this. Like, I could be recording something that is way easier, way more enjoyable, and way more lucrative. Because I don't even know how to gauge how successful this project will be. This might not even get 1,000 views, and no one gives a shit, you know? I just released 2 projects recently when I went on holiday. The Batman project did pretty well, the other project didn't. And you never really know, so you can never really bank on it. This is a shitty fight, by the way. This might be one of my least favourite fights in the game. So you have the chest hole enemy in mass, and all his mates just kind of awkwardly shoot at you. So one of the things you need to be aware of is when he fires the bombs out like that, if you're close to him, he'll always bukkake you, so roll. And additionally, never do a heavy attack. If you do a heavy attack, you will not be able to recover to dodge the inevitable finger pistol that this guy's going to try and shoot you with. And you see that? When you try and roll away from things, you have to be really careful too, because you might roll into a bomb, and you might just immediately die. And I got really lucky then that bomb didn't do too much damage. But I remember these fights with the tents and the chest holes being really, really painful, because they're not fun, you know? You literally wail on an enemy that should die in 1/20th of this time, but it doesn't. And I don't understand why an enemy that's whole design is to shoot at you from a distance takes this much damage when you're up close. And it just leads me to this balance conceit that we're going to keep poking at every so often. This idea that the game is balanced around New Game Plus. But you know the problem with that, guys? Is even on New Game Plus, these fights still take way too much. The enemies still have too much life. And there's a mechanic in this game, these chips that you can make. And as you travel around the world, you're going to be doing side missions and side quests and getting loot and things. And in the loot are components that you can put into a computer to build these chips. And these chips are an accessory that builds your character a little bit. And they do everything from increasing the damage you deal to decreasing the damage you take, increasing cooldowns and tension and slow motion and things. Hey, we got the invincible mode. And I'm still going to dodge because I don't like the idea of being invincible on some random chance. I personally think it's a terrible mechanic in a game full of terrible mechanics. But he teleports away because he takes so much to die that I can't fucking kill him convincingly. And then we get a nice bug as we try to throw him. No more Heroes 3, ladies and gentlemen. You'll either love it or hate it. Maybe you'll be in the middle, who knows. But these chips have kind of some interesting features, but the ratio on them I think is a bit off. And I don't rightly know where to find some of them. And when you don't know where to find some of them, you can't get the ones you want. And I don't know if you're anything like me, guys, but I tend to have that kind of luck in games where I get all the stuff for everyone else and none of the stuff for me. So the chips that I personally use, on my first playthrough, I used a chipset which was increase the damage of my fast attacks, or increase my damage of my attacks I think by 10%, but I take 5% extra damage. And I put 3 of those on for 30% extra damage. And I'm not entirely certain how the chips stack, or how they multiply, or if they multiply at all. Then I experimented a little bit with the wrestling move damage increase, where you can increase the damage of the, your wrestling moves, which I really like. That one seems kind of cool, because it's 20%, and 20% sounds huge, doesn't it? If you put 3 of those on, you'll have, what, 60%? That could be really, really good. And then the other one that I found, which resonated with my playstyle a little bit more, was the when you do a perfect dodge, increase the time that the game is slowed by 50%. And those are the 3 chips that I will be using in this walkthrough, guys, or that I would recommend that you use, unless you have all the chips and you're doing this in New Game Plus and you have a playstyle that you really like. And the only alterations I would make is if you find the more upgraded versions. So I'm going to get the chip that gives me 100% slow motion for a perfect dodge, and I'm going to put that on, but that'll be towards the end of the game on like chapter 8 or something, episode 8. And then I'm going to do damage and wrestling moves, and then eventually I'm going to do wrestling moves in slow motion, and that will be the sum of my parts. And again, when I was first thinking about projects for this game, not only could I have done no upgrades, but I could have also done no chips. This game was rife with things to limit, to make it more difficult and to make it more interesting for a challenge run. But then the base balance is so tedious. Who's going to have fun with that? Who wants to beat up on a standard enemy that stands there, doesn't do anything, and the only reason you get hit is because you're stuck in fucking active attack animations that you can't cancel because you thought you had enough time to swing a wide hit? Like, it's... To me, it seems like just a lack of foresight and insight. And it's consistent throughout the whole game. But here we go with another designated. Dude, I can't speak today. Here is a designated match, and we have 2 of the chest holes and a single bone who is slightly upgraded with his extra piece of protection. And like, look at a fight like this. This is 2 archers and a melee enemy. And look how much I have to hit them. And you know the thing that makes me really, really confused about this game? Is this game has this random series of roulette slashes. And the idea is you attack a monster, and then every so often you trigger these slashes that you do the Wiimotes for, and then when you do that you get this roulette that pops up, this slot machine, this slot slash, and then you get a random reward after it, and some of these rewards are invincibility, which is nuts, and some of them are like Mustang mode, which is so broken it begs belief at how stupid it is. And then a lot of the time you don't get anything. So they have all these random things and all these things popping up on the screen. And the idea from the first No More Heroes that I got, which doesn't seem to even be the case in this one so much, is in No More Heroes 1 I baited the enemies together, and then I beat up one of the jobbers, and then when it did the slash, the program slash, the roulette one, I would slash the guy I was beating up, and the massive beam saber would kill all the other guys. And you'd get those fountains of blood. And I don't know if it's because I was on easy and it doesn't do that on the harder difficulties or something, but to me the game's flow seemed to be about grouping the enemies, making one vulnerable, and then using that one to exploit everyone else. And that's a system that I like a lot. I love the idea of that. I love the idea of, in Metal Gear Rising, having a bunch of enemies come near me, one enemy does an attack, I do a perfect parry, and as I do the riposte, I cleave 2 or 3 enemies and kill them all. That makes you feel powerful, it makes you feel amazing. And it makes the game feel almost overbalanced to the point where you are super lethal, and it's a great power fantasy, even on the harder difficulties. So I thought that... Oh, I got stuck with a bomb there, by the way. But if you do the throw, I think that invincibility will... This will help me as well. If I can blow up in this, I'll be absolutely fine. There's the kick. Oh, and it got me just coming out. If I'd have delayed that a little bit and then done the death kick, I would have dodged that bomb. But going back to the retry thing, if I was doing this seriously, going for no damage or something, and really trying to grind the game, when I get struck by a bomb, I'd pause it and retry, like I can in Metal Gear Rising, that game that came out 10 years ago. But in this game you can't do that, so I can't do it. and it's weird. And it really frustrates me. But there's a few games that use this feature of you weakening one of the people and then using that to hurt everyone else. Think of something like Ninja Gaiden 3, a very popular game, a game that Ninja Gaiden fans love and will always tell you how much they love it, and how wonderful it was, and how a true sequel to the mighty Ninja Gaiden Black and Ninja Gaiden 2 it chose to be. In that game, you can trigger a steel on bone against an enemy, and then you can use that to kill the whole room. Very, very powerful technique. Very, very cool. That, to me, is a great mechanic in a terrible game. And the coolest part about it is if you disagree with its principle, if you disagree with how strong it is and how overpowered it is and how easy it is and how exploitative it is, you don't have to use it. Oh, that was a bad activation. Damn, it didn't even kill anybody. We've got some serious tanky boys here as we take on the dual katana bro, everybody's favourite. Ooh, we got the full armor mode again. I don't actually know what that means. Full armor mode. Does that mean that you get the suit of armor? Is that what that is? Does it bring the robot back? I think it does, doesn't it? Is that what it's called? Full armor mode? I didn't know that. Plays the game 3 times, doesn't even know about full armor mode's name. True fan, right? But when you do that strategy in this game, you bundle the enemies together, you beat up one, you get the slot cut, and then you do it, and it does hurt some of the other guys, but they don't really do it enough. And it makes me wonder why they don't have some... Oh, here we go. I've got to talk about this, because this is terrible. So this is it Lucy Love? I believe that this is a character from a previous game. I don't have the particulars. The music on this fight is amazing. But this is everything wrong with No More Heroes 3 in one fight, dude. So we have this girl that has an absurd amount of HP. She has these attacks that should be easy to dodge, that you can learn to dodge, but if you dodge them by sight, you generally get hit. Because you have to do it early, and the whole game's like fucking weird like that. And then you have these environmental hazards that have a bit of a telegraph, but every so often you can't really see them, and sometimes you run into them because they're off camera. And then you have perspective changes, environmental hazards, and then you combine it with her having tons of HP, and this game being kind of goofy, and you have this fight that I really didn't like. And my strategy is quite simple. I'm not going to do fancy slow-mo dodges, I'm going to space her. I'm going to space her with movement, and I'm just going to attack, and we're going to play it really slow, really safe, use the death glove, and hopefully we don't have to contend with it too long. When I come back and do the death bosses, I've got some strategies for this boss fight now that I didn't have when I was recording. But sometimes when you're doing a... See that just then? Be very careful with blocks too. When the enemy starts blocking, it gets real dangerous. That move is very powerful, but it didn't actually hit me then. It was the floor flame that hit me. And because the telegraph on it is so good, I'm sure you saw it too, right? And the visual clutter in this game is nuclear. If you've never played it, you might be watching this and thinking, how the hell do you see anything? And it is bad at first, but you do get used to it. You definitely get used to it. But something cool in this game, and in the previous ones I believe, is, do you see how when I'm locked onto her, it puts up that dotted circle around her? And then when she swings, there's this pink motif that flickers for a moment and then goes away. That's the game's way of telling you when you're supposed to do the perfect dodge. So if you've ever wondered in a game what is the exact timing of when to press the button, and if you've not wanted to mess with Cheat Engine or some kind of trainer that turns on those boxes to see them, this game has a mechanic to help you see visually what you're supposed to do and what's expected of you. And I think that that's a really clever design in a game with some really dumb design. And watch the ground shockwave here. This boss is so boring that the amount of time she came out of the ground and hit me with that shockwave, because I kept forgetting it was there, was a lot. But we're going to go into the full armor mode, we're going to hit her with the explosives and see how much it does. Hopefully it does a ton. I wonder if there is an upgrade that lets you increase the damage of that mode, because when I played on normal and I did that mode, it hit like a truck. And I was really hoping I could use that to get around some of the parts I didn't like. But again, you go into the roulette, don't you? Because think about it, feasibly, if you beat up her and you get those slot slashers, you can then spin the roulette and get full armor mode. It's unlikely, and statistically it's quite low, but it can happen. you could feasibly do multiple roulette slashes on this boss, get multiple full armor mode, and then just kill her with that. But again, it has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with the game. You know, it's random. And it's the same with the Mustang mode. Mustang mode is essentially like a devil trigger in this game, but you don't have any control over it because it's procced by the game itself after one of those roulettes. And then when you're in it, you get this huge force multiplier that's almost too good and too stupid that it feels boring to use. And my favourite aspect of using the Mustang mode is that when you come out of it, a lot of the times you end up putting yourself in a bad situation because Mustang mode, it pretty much encourages you to mash because you attack really quickly. And I'm going to encourage you to mash the quick attack, do not mash heavy. If you mash heavy attacks when you're in Mustang mode, when you come out of it, you'll do the big slow looping moves, and the boss will attack through what you're doing and probably kill you instantly. And the best part is you won't see it happen, because Mustang mode has got so much visual clutter and so many particle effects going on and so much happening on the screen, that you won't realise that you've come out of it, and you won't realise that the boss is no longer stunned and flinching, and then they'll just kill you. And it's really weird because you might have played up to that point for like 5 solid minutes of absolutely kicking ass, and then you got rewarded randomly by Mustang mode, only then for Mustang mode to betray you because of all the visual clutter. And I suppose you could say, well, you shouldn't mash, and I do agree. I do think that mashing in an action game is the enemy of a competent player and something you don't really want to do, but that is a mode where he attacks really quickly, so pressing the button quickly is a good idea. And then we now get to this part, which is my favourite part, which I've thus learned after this that you can actually change this perspective, I think, by going up to the camera and breaking it, which I think is a really, really cool idea, but I didn't know you could do it, so instead, I'm going to suffer it. And then we get the slash, we get nothing from the reels, and my only advice here, guys, is to try to play patient, play safe, keep your distance, only attack the moves you know, and use your death glove. After killing the third boss, this grab is really, really convenient too, because as long as you get out of it, it doesn't seem to stack damage until you lose the engagement with the quick time event. But I didn't talk about the death glove, did I? We now have an upgraded death glove after the third boss. It has the death force, it has the death kick, it has the death slow motion, and it has the death rain, I think it's called. Each of these moves is really, really useful, and you want to start using them in tandem. My favourite combination in this game is to do force push to knock somebody away. That does not hard knock down, so they usually recover quite quickly. However, if you force kick, I'm saying force, aren't I? Like it's fucking Star Wars. I mean death, I'm sorry guys. So, death push, or death force, then you want to do death kick to teleport to them and knock them down into a hard knockdown. Then when you've done that, you want to do the death slow, so it slows them on the ground so you can beat the shit out of them. And then you want to do the death rain to attack them while you're beating the shit out of them. That is the combination that you'll see a lot of players move into because it's one of the first things you'll know to do, you'll figure out, and it's effective. And depending on the situation and depending on what you're doing, I like to always keep one on hand. Like if there's a boss or an enemy that is particularly dangerous and can suddenly just kill you and you don't like them, a really good idea is to push them over, then slow them on the ground. You know? Or even just slow them, let them walk into the slow, and then do the move you were scared to do. And if you always keep something like that as a bit of a backup, then you'll always have the capacity to engage and to close the distance on somebody that's problematic. And speaking of problematic, this whole fucking sequence is just dog shit. I hate this fight. The fight itself would be fine, but the environment ruins it. It adds nothing that makes it fun. It's just fucking tedious. And the one mercy that the developers did is that the environmental stuff doesn't hurt you that much, but she does. Like if she hits you with her full combo, you're dead. But luckily, she's dead. And then we move down the ranking to the next place. It's a shame as well. I love the idea of this fight, but I think the execution is poor. This is also the part where I say to you, don't worry guys, that is one of the worst and it won't be like that again, as we kill Kimmy Love and take her place. But the final boss, the second phase, is waiting for us. And I'm not going to say anything, because you either know or you don't. But there's some interesting stuff coming up, including the Velvet Chairgirl, which is a fight that I particularly despise. But I'm going to talk about that when it turns up, because it's really dumb. But there's the rank, there's the loot, there's the stats page. And she's next, isn't she? Velvet Chairgirl, which I love her name. I think it's such a silly name. And the fight is a gimmick fight, which, you know, you might like it. But my controller has a problem. I'm using a broken controller right now because the one before it broke as well. And I've been meaning to buy another PlayStation 3 controller because I quite like that controller once I modify it. But I haven't done that because it's kind of hard to find them, and they try to rip you off as we take on 2 full faces here and a leopard man. This is a difficult fight, this, guys, because the other dude is going to absolutely one-hit kill wreck you if you're not careful. These guys have the capacity to stack damage and do some real bad stuff. And because these dudes take so long to die, when you beat them and you focus on the small dude, he might just one-shot you. And this is where No More Heroes 3 really shows its fangs. Because a fight like this should be fun, and it shouldn't be too bad, but because of the way the game works mechanically, this is kind of a war of attrition that at any moment you can lose. And I'm not averse to difficulties that kill you in one hit, I'm not. A lot of the times when I do my no damage runs, they make it easier to record. But I only do those runs on games that work and games that I know I can confidently engage with. And as much as I really like No More Heroes 3, and you're probably thinking, you like this game, strange Englishman? How? You don't sound like you like this game. Well, this is the sound of me liking this game. I know it's strange, but it's true. I like this game. And I've just had a week away from it, because I recorded this when the game came out, and I was really hoping I could share it with you before I went on holiday, but of course the holiday got in the way. So I am a week late to coming back, and after that I have mellowed a little bit, because I was a bit pissed off at the whole process. And I was more process of what the game could be and what it isn't, rather than what it is. And I do think that as much as it can be so easy to fall into that hole of like, I wish it was better, and this is bad and that is bad, I want to take a moment to actually say that what is here I think is fun. And sometimes fun for some people can be enough. Modern gaming is in a really weird place of some odd shit happening, and some of the like Gotham Knights just released. And that game has never looked good once. I just don't understand how anybody could have watched that game over its development and its previews and thought that we were getting a banger. And it's come out, it's getting bad reviews, it's been called boring, it's been called ugly, it's been called, you know, it runs at 30 FPS on a next-gen console, which is just mind-boggling. And it looks worse than the game that came out like 7 years ago. But this is kind of what I'm talking about, you know? We have these developers now that know how to make games, and I do that with those quotation marks that frustrate some people when you say that when you're speaking. But we have these dev teams that make these big, shiny, expensive things that promise all these great features. And then when we get these games, they're lame. And they're nowhere near as interesting or creative or as fun as games we got 5 years ago. Which is really funny because those games weren't as creative or as interesting as the games we got 5 years before that. And the one thing that these games did have was technology. So, most games that come out that aren't that creative or exceptional generally are tour de forces on engines, or tour de forces, you know, on fidelity, on some kind of particles. There's something they do really well that is the reason why that they are either successful or that they were banked on so heavily. Something that's appealing. So that the mechanics don't have to be so strong. And then you realise, don't you, that when you take away that visual element, when you take away that fidelity, those games are shown for what they really are, which is entirely lacking. And I think that's the true story of Gotham Knights, and I've not played it yet, so I can't really speak on it myself. But I get the feeling from what I've seen that Arkham Knights is one of those games that if it looked beautiful, that would justify its existence, and it would give the casual audience enough of something to attach to so they can have a fun time. But it doesn't. And that's the problem, isn't it? And this game's the opposite. This game, visually, is dated and not great. It's stylistic and its aesthetic is cool, and I quite like how this game looks. There's a charm to it. You know, I'm an older gamer. I remember when games didn't look great, but at the time they looked amazing. And I can appreciate that. And I'm sure you can too. But this game is never going to win anybody over by its raw visual fidelity. It's its creativity, it's the risk it takes and how just counterculture it is on its design choices. That's what people find appealing. It's odd, and odd is interesting. Even if it's bad, it's interesting. And the reason this game looks like this, and the reason the open world in this game looks so laughably bad, is because the game is gameplay focused. And I know that sounds strange to say, the idea of, you know, fidelity, visual focus, gameplay lacking, gameplay focus, visuals lacking. And I'm with you if you're probably saying right now, but I want both. And I think we all do, you know, we want these games that have good fidelity and great mechanics, you know. I'll take that. If we can get great fidelity and great mechanics, even better. But the reality is, something has to give. And you either choose your performance and your visuals, or you choose your mechanics and your world, or your game design. And for me, game design should always be king, mechanics should always be king. I played Evil Within on Xbox 360 for fuck's sake. Go back and watch those videos. It looks like you're pushing raw meat through a microphone, that's how bad it looks. That game was beautiful and it looked like dog shit. But at the time, I didn't know, you know, I didn't know any difference and I enjoyed it for what it was and I got on with it. Because the mechanics in that game were... The gameplay was the focus in that game. The visuals are great, but the mechanics are where that stuff lies, you know. And I will happily get rid of some visuals for performance, because that's what I value. And that's one of the reasons why I turn down a lot of the graphical settings when I play. Because I want to get a game that runs really well. And this game runs decently. It doesn't run great, but it runs decently a lot of the time. I'm surprised how good it runs for a Japanese port, but you know, when you consider how it looks and how limited it is, like, one of the things you're not going to get the full appreciation of if you watch this walkthrough, if you don't play the game, is these rooms I'm coming in here, you might have seen it before, right? This room, this gold-floored room with the blue walls and all the weird cargo containers that are in it. Like, how come this room keeps turning up, you know? How come we keep going to that gas station with that big wagon? How come these places are repeating? Where are these places and how does this link into the world? The thing you're not seeing here, guys, is these are instances. So you drive around an open world, which is one of the ugliest open worlds I've ever seen, and I kind of love that. I love how shit it looks, minus the Call of World. I think Call of World is just awful. It hurts my eyes, it gives me headaches. But you walk around this open world that has obviously had some corners cut and some funding cut, and you know, you can see the string holding it together and the hamster running on the wheel to power it. And then you get to these emblems, and when you touch them, there's a wonderful X-Files motif, and you go into the sky, into like an air pyramid, and then you do these fights. And they do this so that they don't have to render that huge world that doesn't run very well. And that's good. It might add to the repetitive nature of the game. It might add to you getting a bit more worn out with it and less interested in it in the long run. But it guarantees that when you do the fighting, everything here is in your favour when it comes to performance, because it's only rendering this small room. And the enemies are in here, and you're in here, and you get the best possible experience you can and their ability to port the game. So when I'm in these rooms, guys, I'm getting 240 pretty much. When I'm out in that open world, I'm not getting 240. And I don't mind, because the open world is just a delivery system for these encounters. And I think that that's a clever way of getting around some of the limitations in both the design and the hardware. This game was not designed for PC, and it's not the PC version, really. This is the Switch version that's been ported, and the PlayStation 5 version that they released has got a bunch of visual upgrades that this version does not have on by default. However, you can go into the settings, and you can enable those features by putting in a bunch of things that the game doesn't allow you to do. You know, clever people on PC had to put this in and make the game use your hardware, which is absolutely hilarious. And I haven't even mentioned that I think that this game doesn't have mouse and keyboard. And that to me is one of the things... Usually, you hear me shit on PC ports all the time because they're never up to standard. They're never as good as they should be because the PC port should be a lot better. This PC port, the only reason you haven't heard me bang on it too much is because A, I didn't try to play it on mouse and keyboard, and B, it runs good for me. That's the only reason you haven't heard me shit on it. If the performance was worse, I'd have shit on it. If I tried mouse and keyboard, I would have shit on it. But I am almost of the belief that this does not have mouse and keyboard support. Imagine, guys, right, get this. Imagine you buy a console, you buy a PlayStation 5 for a ludicrous amount of money, because they're quite rare right now, and you buy a game for it that you've been waiting to play, and it doesn't have controller support. You have to plug in a mouse and keyboard to play it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how pissed are you right now? Pretty fucking pissed, right? Industry standard! They had a year to port this game, and it doesn't have the control scheme of the platform it's on. And I don't think you can defend that. And I know you'll get those people that'll be like, ha ha ha, Master Race, lol, consoles supreme, and those kind of folks. But they're 8-year-olds and nobody cares about them because they're going to die alone. And we're going to laugh. Oh, this is an interesting one. So this is another one of those flying robot sequences you might have noticed. And it's the same concept, guys. You want to steadily move around. You want to move your reticle over the body of the creature. And then as soon as you see one of the lock-ons, hold the reticle on that lock-on. And then if you do it, it'll tell you that you can proc missiles. And then you're just going to keep rotating around, kiting the projectiles, and see if you can do as much damage as possible. But be really careful here, because all the stuff that's chasing me can be fired at, but it will hurt you. And it's much better, mostly, to move, unless you've got some kind of quick kill. Which would be really cool if somebody has one of those, but I don't have a quick kill of this one. The only reason I kept these in, guys, is because they were different. And something I want to talk about as well. You don't have to do all of the designated missions, I don't believe, because I think you can just get the money. If you get the cash, you can go in there and just pay your way to the boss. I could be wrong on that because I never did it, but one thing I do know is that you can do the designated missions and not earn enough money to then be able to afford the participation ticket to get into the boss encounter. So on maybe the first few, I would recommend doing some of the mini games as well, like, you know, mowing the lawns and clearing the toilets and things. But there goes the enemy. There's a wonderful motion blur being applied, and then we get to do the killing cut, which I really like these moments. I feel like the robot in this game was super underused. It makes me think they had this idea for this really, really cool feature, but they either didn't have the money, the time, or the know-how to make it, because I feel like we could have got some serious boss fights in this robot flying around in space. It could have been like Zone of the Enders tier. We could have even had some levels where you get to do that as well, but alas, it didn't happen. So now we have 2 chest holes and a full face. So again, this is a fight that if the balance was better and the life wasn't absurd, you would have a lot of fun here, because this is a good combination of enemies. You have the projectile guys pushing you around at a distance, you have the guy being aggressive pushing you when you get too close to them. In theory, the design is all here. In execution, everybody takes too much damage and it's just kind of shitty and you die in 1 to 2 hits. So be very careful. The name of No More Heroes, Carolina Reaper, is all about being careful. Because if you don't, that's when you start resetting, and when you start resetting it starts getting really frustrating. But I am looking forward to playing No More Heroes 1 and 2 properly now that I've put some time into this game. It's a shame that the PC ports for those games are so shitty, because those games are capped at 60 FPS, and I know this might sound strange to some people that don't value frame rate, but once you get used to playing at high frame rates and you go back to 60 FPS, it feels terrible. Like, it is immediately apparent, it irritates your eye, it hurts your fucking brain. And I know I'm very hyperbolic, I know I say very silly things, and it's part of the game and the gambit and the character and everything, but this is 100% straight. The mask is off, the YouTuber's down. Like, I put No More Heroes 1 on my stream after playing this on stream for about 2 hours, and I turned it off within 30 seconds because immediately I was getting a headache. And it's one of those things when you get used to Silk, and you get used to the smoothness and that tactile feeling, that baby soft feeling, do you really want some fucking Hessian peeled builder hand with his calluses scratching you up? You don't. And that's not to say that 60's not good, 60's fine if you're used to it and if that's the standard that you like. You know, I used to be that guy, but now I'm going to have to adjust. And I think what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to practice on Street Fighter 5, because I've not played that game in like 2 months, and I need to get my Cody back so I can actually play more with my community. So I'm gonna wake up my Cody, who's been resting, shall we say. And because that game runs at 60, I'm hoping it's going to get my eye a little bit more used to 60 and not as pretentious and douchey and wanting high frames. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to play No More Heroes 1 and 2. And if I like those games, guys, I will cover them on YouTube. And if you like this project or you want to see No More Heroes 1 and 2, please feel free to show some support on the comments, and I'll read those, and I'll know that there's somebody out there that gives a fuck, you know? Because one of the things that sucks about being a YouTuber that's been doing this for a while, and having a channel that's kind of fallen out of the fancy, or what little fancy it managed to acquire, is you can't really tell how many people are really engaging. And of course, I'm not asking people to, you know, drop a like and comment a bunch of nonsense you don't want to say. If you want to leave a comment, that's awesome. You know, if you want to leave a like, that's awesome too. It really does help. But I'm not going to ask for it because I don't think I should have to, you know. I'm one of those people that if you liked it and you want to like it, you're going to like it, you know. And I know that people forget, and I know that people need to be asked. The psychology of it makes a lot of sense. But for me, it's like, if you liked it, you can express that. You don't have to. Life is busy, you know. You're all busy people. You do you. But it's the same thing, for instance, with the EP that I'm going to be releasing. I wrote some music recently. Some people won't call it music, which is really funny because it's very noisy. But I wrote a grind album that I'm really proud of, that I'm going to be selling on Bandcamp once I've set it up. And I'm going to be selling it for declare your price, name your price. And the reason I like that price model is A, I'm not trying to make money making music because A, I'm not educated enough, I'm not good enough, and I don't really see it as something to make money from, really. You know, it's just a passion more so than anything. Making money playing video games is awesome, it's the dream. Making money making music is for other people because, you know, they're good at that, and that's what they specialise in, and more power to them. But for me, I was really proud of it, I really liked it, and I want to put it out there for people who are interested. And I also wanted it to be one of those cases where you can pay what you think it's worth. You know, to you, it might be worth 50 cents, and you can pay that. And to me, I think that model where you pay what it's worth is the best model that you can do. I don't like how the camera changes on this minigame, by the way, it's really frustrating. The reason I like it so much is not everybody has a ton of money. Not everybody can afford to pay, you know, $12 for a CD. $12 for a CD is expensive, especially in a time where you can get everything for free and everything's streaming everywhere on YouTube and Spotify and whatnot. So the people that go that extra mile to pick it up are doing so because they want it. You know, they want to either have a physical copy, which I will not be able to provide, unfortunately. That's a bit more production than I'm looking for. But, you know, the people that actually want to have that on their player, have that when they're out in the world, just to own it. Sometimes collecting is the best part, isn't it? That's the fun part. And I like the idea of giving someone who wants it the ability to get it. And if you don't have a lot of money, you can put in something really, really low, you know? You can do something that you think is appropriate for your price bracket. And if you do have more money and you do think it's going to be cool and you want to support it, you can put a bit more if you want to, but you absolutely don't have to. And those are the best models, I think, payment models, because if you're anything like me, I feel really guilty. The idea of putting a small amount on, you know, pay what you want, doesn't even comply, because that's somebody's effort, that's somebody's heart that's gone into that, and it makes me feel like a dickhead if I were to do that. Speaking of dickheads, I nearly messed this one up. Because I thought I was on the other side for some reason, but I wasn't. But let's talk about Velvet Hair Chair. This is, of course, a game of musical chairs, and you have to press the buttons on the screen. And I wouldn't have a problem with this if my right bumper wasn't broken. But my right bumper's broken. I even remapped it in this game so that I never had to use it, and then this minigame uses it anyway. And then the second thing that I have issue with is I hate the font. I fucking hate this pixel font. It looks stupid, it's hard to read. And then I hate that all of these buttons are green. Because if you don't know, ladies and gentlemen, the Xbox 360 controller has a button on it that is green. And my brain has associated green with that button. So when every button is green, it's confusing. And there's no way to make these represent the Microsoft controller. If these were the controller colours of an actual Xbox controller, it'd be absolutely fine and I wouldn't have half the issues I have with this. But I find this to be, like, tooth-pullingly annoying. This is easily my least favourite encounter in the game, just because it's not a fight. And I really think they could have done something a bit more interesting. Because this whole thing looks to me like saving budget. It looks like saving budget and it looks cheap. That minigame could have been way more interesting, but instead you get garbage, and Velvet Chairgirl is dead, and we take her spot. But what do we have now? Now we have the boss fight against, I think he's called Ohma. This dude keeps saying Adrian as well, which is kind of funny. So the idea of this fight is you want to whack on this dude, and as you whack on him, he shrinks. This is also probably the only boss in the game that has a good life bar too. Because every time you whack this enemy, it loses a bit of life, seemingly. And that is kind of how the whole game should have been, if you ask me. Hell, I would have made it even better, personally. That's one of the amendments I would have done. But the thing to bear in mind here is that the detection on this laser is kind of dog shit. So sometimes if you swing behind this creature, you will push your hitbox so far forward, you'll get lasered from behind. It actually happened to me on my casual playthrough and I got really salty. But do not use Y attacks on this boss unless it's stunned. Because you cannot get out of them sometimes, and it will just hit you with this Ghostbuster laser, and this laser is a one-hit kill on every difficulty, regardless of your HP bar. It just wrecks you. That boss shouldn't be a problem, though, for most people, but he does one-hit kill, and if you get unfortunate, you'll just have to do it all over again. The game understands that these bosses have been kind of dog shit, so it checkpoints at the start of that fight, and you don't have to do Velvet Chair again. But we take out the two bosses here, and then we move on to the next episode as we push towards that showdown with the Mighty Fu. This one is so Kingdom Heartsy. But there is our clear time, there's our damage taken, there's our best rank as well. Rare footage of Chris getting the best rank in this game. And then we get a bunch of things to mess with and hopefully get some cool chips. They'll make the game slightly more easy. I haven't tried the death mode yet, I'm quite excited to see how hard it is. Because I'm curious how the game's going to find difficulty. I think they're just going to have more HP and kill you in one hit. And dying in one hit's not the end of the world for me, especially when I know how to manipulate the bosses pretty well. But there goes Travis moving on in the world. What a beast. There we go, ranking 5. Moving into, I think it's episode 6, entitled Hell. And we have two of these dudes, the triple puts, and one of those chest holes. And one thing you'll notice in this game, folks, as you play a little longer, these enemies will start to change colour a little bit. They get palette swapped later on. They don't get any new moves or any real deviations that make them improved, but they get better stats. So their damage seems to be high because everything's quite high, and their HP seems to be quite nuclear because, of course, No More Heroes 3. See, look at the damage that just did. If that had hit me clean on, I would have probably died from that, but I got very lucky then. And I don't really understand palette swaps in a modern sense anymore, other than laziness. Laziness and convenience. And if you don't know, oh, this is when I was getting a bug as well. So I got a couple of bugs on this game. This one was really, really frustrating in this session. So I'm playing on controller, as you can tell, and it's the game is saying use the mouse to do any of the interactions that you normally use the right analog for, and that mouse pop-up looks very different to the controller one. So it was really confusing me, and I couldn't get it to stop. I turned the game off, I did a few things, and it kept doing it. It was not the best thing, but you know, you can kind of ignore it, can't you? But I'm looking forward to those older games, because those older games seem to have more of an emphasis on weapons and wrestling moves. I've heard that in the second game you can have 2 swords, which I think is really cool. One of the areas of this game that makes no sense to me is that you only have 1 katana. And I don't understand why sequels would get rid of complexity in the favour of this simplistic death glove system. Because the only thing new in this game, to my knowledge, is this glove. And think about it. two of them push the enemy away, one of them slows time, which you can already do with a dodge, and then the other one is like a pack of bees just stinging somebody for a certain period of time. Like, it's not very interesting, is it? And then when you get them at the start, you start off, of course, with a single move with the tool, and then you get the full suite, and they never change. And if they do, I miss them. You know, like, you don't get more Deathglove abilities. You don't get to build Travis into your preferred Deathglove style, you know? Because there's only four of those tools. There are no better ones, no different ones. There's no utilities, there's no damage ones, there's nothing really. And why come up with a system of having this glove with these powers and then not give the player like 8 powers to choose from, so everyone has their own different assortment of powers, you know? And it makes me think that they just kind of couldn't come up with things, so they just dumped this in and called it a day. And it kind of irks me a bit when I talk about Suda, because Suda51 has this reputation for being this great game developer, and I've never seen it. And I just don't understand the attitude of it. That was bad. Nearly died then. Gotta be very careful now. And we get the wonderful flashing screen that everybody loves. At least it doesn't make a noise. The noise is way worse than the flash, but now we have to play perfect or we die. And that's kind of the whole game, really. And this justification that it's designed around New Game Plus really makes me laugh. Because this game is, even at fully upgraded Travis, this game is still pulling teeth on this difficulty. You are still beating enemies up for far too long, and you still die really quickly. And the only thing I can think of when people say that it's designed around New Game Plus is that they're upgrading the HP. Because I've never upgraded Travis's HP, so I've always died in like 1 to 2 hits. It's never a big deal, really. Just get on with it. And who knows, maybe if you upgrade the life, you take an absolute pounding. But my mentality with video games is unchanged. All the effort I put into upgrading my HP can be put into other areas that would help me better if I'm a better player. And it's one of the reasons I always do it. And it's quite ironic too, because in all of my Souls playthroughs, or the blind playthroughs that I've done, and the Souls-like blind playthroughs that I've done, I've always avoided HP, and I've always tried to, you know, challenge myself on those runs and boost everything else and become this glass cannon. And then when Elden Ring came out, I decided to flip it on its head. And I decided to actually pump my HP as a joke. Because if you go to my playthroughs and you read the comments, it's a lot of people saying things like, why isn't he upgrading his life? You wouldn't be complaining this much if you upgraded your life. All these things, you know, I've read a million of them. They're famous pretty much now on the channel, these kind of comments, because I get them a lot. And on Elden Ring, upgrading your HP really doesn't make that much of a difference. So you can still get 1 to 2 hit in the Consecrated Waste anyway. And I just found that to be supremely delicious. Because in all the other games, if I'd upgraded my life to 99 like I did in that, I would have been nigh unkillable. But not in Elden Ring, because Elden Ring is just designed slightly differently. And hopefully we'll be getting news on the DLC. And you better strap your asshole for the DLC, because you know it's going to be bad. And speaking of bad, any fight that takes place in this sci-fi environment like this is probably not very fun. And we have a couple of encounters coming up here, guys, where I'm going to take these really slow, because I would play for a good 5 minutes and then get one hit killed and get really frustrated, and it happened multiple times, and I was just getting a bit fed up with the game. So instead of being balls to the wall aggressive and getting in there and chopping them and doing no damage and feeling like a fucking ant with a toothpick, I decided to just use the Death Glove and use spacing and play very safe. And it's unfortunate too, because if the balance was better on the HP, none of this would exist. And I would not be saying any of these critiques that I've been saying about the balance. I would be saying to you that it's a shame there's not that many enemies, but it's really fun, you know, stunning one enemy and killing a group and getting into those wrestling moves in a decent amount of time, and it's just not here. But it gives me a good baseline too, because it's going to enable me to compare it to the first 2 games and see if they have the same issue. And I've heard mixed opinions. But that's Suda51, isn't it? Mixed opinions. People think he's a genius. People think he's like upper echelon of designers, and I think he's a fucking hack. I think he always was. I don't think he's done anything good. I really don't. I just don't think he should be held in the same pantheon as the people that people put him with. And don't get me wrong, I like No More Heroes, and I think it's cool, but I don't think he's had anything to do with these games for a long time. You know, the dude writes the stories, and that's about it. And one of the reasons why I'm almost certain he doesn't have much to do with half the games he gets credited for is because Shinji Mikami did fuck all on Shadows of the Damned and his name was on it. And here's the thing, right guys, you can like Suda51 all you want. You know, he's a crazy dude, he makes crazy games for with Grasshopper Studios in conjunction, right? They do crazy things together, and sometimes apart. But the one thing they do more often for me is make incredibly underwhelming games that confuse me as to why everybody raves about them. Because I didn't like Killer 7. I thought it looked great, and I thought it was really interesting, but I didn't like it personally. Although I do think it's probably one of the better games that they've made, or he's made, or whoever made that one. I thought Shadows of the Damned was fucking terrible. I've only played a little bit of No More Heroes 1, which I thought was pretty cool at the time. This game is cool, but deeply flawed. Killer is Dead is cool, but deeply flawed. And then that Let It Die, or whatever it was, that was just fucking abysmal. So, you know, when you add all those things together, like, why does anybody talk about this dude like he's anything other than fucking sweary at best? Like, I don't get it. Like, he's Yoko Taro tier to me. Just completely overhyped and absolutely garbage. And I hate fucking Yoko Taro, dude. I truly do. If he'd never existed, I think games would be better. Because all he's ever done is ruin everything that's fucking great in a genre that I like. And I just don't get it. And that dude is, like, cult status. And it's just absolutely mind-boggling to me. But luckily, the sycophants that I've seen that adore that guy don't compare him to Shinji Mikami. And that makes it okay to me. Because Yoko Taro's crazy, and he makes stupid games that people love. And that's awesome, and I'm glad that they have that. They're not for me. I love their music. I hate their gameplay. But at least it's a niche thing, isn't it? Whereas Suda gets compared to Shinji. And I think if you put those two people together, it's a war you can't win. Think about this for a moment, guys. Take a little boat trip with me, if you could. Shinji Mikami invented survival horror as we know it. In spite of some games that were around at the same time doing similar things, Resident Evil edified and solidified what survival horror would be for the next 20 years. 30 years, nearly. And that's insane, right? And that was one of the first big things he led. Like, he worked on that Aladdin game on the Mega Drive, which is a banger if you've ever played that, hard as balls. But this guy invents a genre that is aped today and incredibly lucrative and popular and successful. And then he doesn't just stop there, but he then goes on to make superb games in every genre he touches. He makes one of the greatest character action games ever made that is vastly misunderstood and oftentimes misaligned. He makes a third-person shooter that is easily the most interesting third-person shooter mechanically, even though people play it like Gears of War, which is completely wrong and it makes the game look fucking boring. And then, not being content to do that, he also goes back to survival horror 2 more times. One, to pretty much like codify the idea of third-person camera. This guy goes back to a series he invented that's then been handled by other people and taken in vastly different directions, goes back to it, makes one of the most beloved games ever that standardizes a camera style that is now in every game you play, and then he goes off and does a bunch of other cool stuff, and then comes back and makes another survival horror game that is really creative and got all kinds of cool aesthetics going onto it. Just kind of like on a whim, just as a laugh. And is easily, by my consideration, the greatest game developer who exists. He is, as I say and will always say, he's up there with Shigeru Miyamoto. He is a Leonardo da Vinci to me. I think that guy is an absolute master. And it makes me sad that we're not getting any games from him at the moment, and that if he makes another game, if we're lucky enough, it will probably be his last. So instead what happens is we get his name on a lot of things, that aren't really much to do with him. And even if he stops right now, his influence is so massive, we have some of the greatest games ever conceived, thanks to that dude. And I'm under no illusion, guys, it's not one person that makes a game. But having a good director, even if they're an arsehole and a psychopath and an absolute control freak and a monster, which apparently he was, that person is he's the person who steers the ship, isn't he? He's the helmsman that takes it all for you. And you need a person like that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm always quick to compliment Shinji and his team and the people that he's worked with, because he gets the best out of those people, and those people do the best work for him. And that, to me, is the beautiful, like, harmony of video game design. So for people to compare Suda51, who in my mind has only ever done things that looked visually quite striking and creative, but have always been mechanically subpar, I will never understand how you can put those two names together. And even if you love No More Heroes, you have to agree, mechanically the game is weak. It's not shit, that's not what I'm saying, but it's not strong either. Like, I see people that go to Godfather Dictator's stream, and they say that Ninja Gaiden Black is clunky. And those people are stupid, and I ignore them. Because they don't get it. They just don't get it. And it's the same with people that complain about God Hand. Like, there's something to be said about designing a control scheme and designing a game around it, and to make those two things complement each other perfectly. That is art. That is finesse. That is grace. That is as classy as it gets as far as design goes. And I just don't understand how people can't appreciate just the splendor there, you know? And then you come to games that are just inferior. I would go as far as to say objectively inferior, in as much as this is a very subjective conversation. Because to me, it's just night and day different. I can't even see a world, and it makes me really confused, because nobody wants, you know, Suda51 to be amazing more than me, because I want as many bloody Shinji Mikamis as we can get, but the fact remains, he's not the same tier. He's not even close. And he seems like a super cool dude as well. He was on one of those presentations that replaced E3 this year. I think he was on the Devolver one, wasn't he? And he was getting in on the acting, he was getting in all the skits and stuff, and he seemed like he was having a great time. He seems like the type of dude that if you had a beer with him, he'd be fucking awesome. Like, I'd love to work with that guy, I would. But I'd say it to his fucking face. These people are comparing you to Shinji Mikami, and you ain't him, dude. You ain't even close to that dude, for my bargaining. And I would love to try and help you to be closer to that dude. But there's just so much in its way, isn't there? And I think sometimes you need that perfect harmony, don't you? You need that perfect combination of things coming together. You need a director who's willing to take risks, and a director who has absolute faith in their vision. But at the same time, you can't have a lunatic at the wheel. You know, you can't have the lunatics running the asylum. You need people to wrangle in the lunacy. You need the creativity to be limited and to work against the limits and the restrictions. Because think about it. Think about the game that you love the most. And if it's No More Heroes and it's by Suda51, then this conversation is over your head and nothing to do with you. But think about it, right? Most of people's favourites games, if you look into them and you look into the development process, were up against some impossible struggle. They were up against some ridiculous crunch or some ridiculous restriction that was nigh impossible to do, and they still managed somehow, tooth and claw, dragging their ass through the bilge water to get to a result that might not have been what they fully wanted, but has gone on to stand the test of time. And there's lots of games like this that barely worked, almost didn't get here, and then went on to be massive, absolute mammoth titles in the industry that we love and we play. And there's something to be said about limitations. There's something to be said about working twice as hard around some obnoxious barricade that goes on to create the necessity of quality, the necessity of something grand. And I think that's what video games are suffering with right now. The biggest barricade to video games, and the biggest hurdle that they face in the current climate is the price. It's the production costs, because everybody has to release these AAA like Goliaths, but nobody can afford to do it. So instead, they all make incredibly expensive and polished looking trailers that sell you a lie, and then the game can never ever hope to make it up to the difference. The difference is too wide of a divide. But this is the next boss, whose name I don't recall, but she's very cool, and I think that this is one of the best fights in the game because it's actually a boss fight. However, there are environmental hazards on the ground that stay for far too long, and they do damage you. And I don't know if there's a way to get rid of them, some kind of tech I didn't figure out, but doing this no damage is going to be a pain in the ass just because of the way it's designed. It's not a difficult fight, it's actually probably the easiest fight in the game because you do so much damage and her life bar goes down really quick compared to the other bosses. But what it does do is it highlights that this game could have been even more interesting than it is. Because after this encounter you're going to get access to the full armor mode where you can control this robot. But I kind of wish more of the game was designed around it because it looks awesome and it's really cool. But I don't think I would be a villain for saying that it's kind of fucking awkward. They throw you into this boss fight, you've never used this robot before, and it controls kind of jankily. The only time you've had your hands on its controller is when you've been flying in space, and now you're on the ground, and they kind of just say, deal with it. So you've got all this arsenal and all these tools, and you're trying to put it all together, and it feels really clunky. And my favourite part is this. You can high profile her windy attack by jumping and hovering, and then you can punish her. But one of the things you'll notice with this robot's animations is that when it swings its quick attacks, it has a hit string that ends, and then there's a palpable delay before it starts again. And it's the same with the heavy attacks, so the best thing to do on the attacks, it seems like, is do the heavy string, and then quickly do the quick string, and then do the heavy string and do the quick string, and cancel the recovery by doing the next strings. And if you don't do that, the input buffer on the robot feels really, really awkward, and really stilted. And it just makes it feel shitty when it's easily the coolest part of this game, I think. But the robot cannot do throws, I don't think. And to me, that's a massive cop-out. And maybe you can, and I didn't do it right, but in my time with the game, I had a couple of heartbreaking fails because I needed to throw her, or like do a throw as the robot, and it left me hanging. Another thing that's really weird about this mechanic too is when you usually activate full armor mode, it fires a projectile, and the camera the camera zooms in on your character, and then it auto targets for you and pivots the camera spinning. But when you don't do that at the start, when you activate this mode, it zooms in on the robot, and then it leaves the camera looking at you. I don't have to tell you why making the camera face away from your opponent in a fight is a bad idea. I would hope that sells itself, that concept, because it's kind of shitty, and it does it a lot, and I don't know if that's a bug, but I don't understand why they would intentionally force the camera to blind you. But again, no more heroes, ladies and gentlemen. But there goes Midori. Is that Midorikawa? Midorikawa? She's dead. I kind of wish she had a cooler name. I don't know if she's a throwback to something in the previous games. There's damage taken, ludicrous amounts of damage taken, barely any skills, no best rank. The result screen looks so sick though, I like these screens a lot. And then we're in the top 5 now. Midori can leave, and then we've got Sniping Lee. Which, I think Sniping Lee is going to be derailed by, I think he's called like Destroyman or something, isn't he? He's a guy that's in the other games. He's come back as an Easter egg, I think. But there's ranking 4, guys. Swiftly moving on. And here are our designated battles. So we have, again, we have 2 of the full faces, and then we have the huge cleaving axed dude who is called Captain Treatment. And this fight is dangerous because this guy's gold, which means he's upgraded in his HP department. And if he hits you, you are in trouble. And I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use our friends, the full faces, to give me the slow motion dodge. And then when I perfectly dodge, I'm going to use, I think, the Mustang upgrade that I have right now. I'm going to carry that over to our friend Captain Treatment, and I'm going to whoop his ass with this. And this is going to be the strategy that I'm using here. But be very careful coming out of this mode, guys, because if you come out of it and he's not stunned, he's just going to hit through it, hyper armor, and kill you. And I need to talk about the upgrades, because I haven't done that yet. So I think there are 4 trees of upgrades. There's HP, there's attack power, there's cooldown of your death glove, there's power of your battery on your weapon, and then there is the moves at the bottom. And on this playthrough, I get everything, I think, except for the HP ones. I prioritised the damage ones, I did all the damage ones, then I did the moves, and then I did, I think, a combination of the... Although, look at the camera right now. Jesus Christ, that was scary. And right now we've finally got to the end where the Mustang dodges. This move is really interesting, because when you do a perfect dodge, you get access to Mustang mode, which is the strongest mode in the game. But there's a couple of things I need to talk about here which I'm not a fan of, which kind of get in the way of my playstyle. So, one of the things I like to do in this game, especially when I don't have any upgrades, is I like to do the running, jumping, light attack, because not only does Travis track really well, but he covers a distance that is quite meaty, and it's fast. And what you can do is you can do a combo on an enemy, and then as you get to the end of the combo, instead of finishing the string and knocking them away or something like that, you can jump and do that light attack, and if you do it right on the right timing, you don't even jump, you like jump cancel into it, it's really quick, and then you can hit the string again. And I was doing that to try and come up with some kind of quicker tech, you know, to do more damage. And in the end it doesn't end up doing more damage, it just kind of looks cool. But what happens is when you buy the moves, there's a move where you do a combo, which is this triple thrust into it's a million stab from Devil May Cry, basically. And then at the end it does a thrust and it hard knockdowns. And you can use that move to loop bosses in an interesting way. But the problem with it is, whenever I do my habit of attack, 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 jump attack, after the jump attack, instead of doing the basic combo again, Travis will now do this thrusting move. And this thrusting move is super dangerous because it's a quick move, but it's hard to get out of, like a Y move, like one of those wider moves. So every so often you'll get stuck in the thrust and an enemy will just hyper armor and hit you through it. And if you don't know it's going to do it, it gets really frustrating and it leads to a bunch of times where you're just going to die and trade. And the problem with the upgrade tree is the problem with every upgrade tree now, which is they want you to buy a linear progression instead of buying what you want. Oh, there's the charge attack as well. Charge attacks are really interesting. I didn't think there was enough visual feedback to tell us what was going on when it comes to charging your weapon. This is a collision bug, by the way. This happens because of high frame rate. This can happen to you as well. So if you ever get stuck, guys, you try to roll and Travis won't move, it's because your frame rate's high. But if you look at your battery, see it eating the battery down? As soon as it stops eating the battery down, that tells you that you are at your maximum amount of charge, it seems like, and that will hopefully do the most amount of damage. And the cool thing about the charge attack is if you release it at the right moment, it will knock down. And if you have the upgrades, which you're going to be buying them, one would think, you now have access to a hard knockdown on the death kick. You then have access to a charge move, which is another hard knockdown, and then you have access to the multi-stabbing move, which is also a hard knockdown. By the time you've looped those moves, you might even have death kick back. So now you enter the phase of what will happen is you'll do a death kick, you'll do a charge hit, you'll do a stabbing combo, and then you'll combo them, they'll stun, you'll combo them more, you'll throw them, you'll get your battery back, you'll get death kick back, and you'll loop. And you can do that on pretty much any humanoid, and if it's a 1v1, you can put bosses in a blender where they cannot do anything really. However, you need to be aware that if you repeat the same knockdown move a second time in a row, it seems like it gives them a grace period to get out of it, so it might not work. But I have seen instances where it did, so I won't say that it doesn't work objectively and blanket-wise, because it might. But I like to loop them in a pattern, and that way you always seem to be able to bank them. But this is 3 full faces, and they have so much HP. It's a cool fight, this one, though. A really, really cool fight. I like it a lot. But look at that. It took 1 square off him. 1 square, guys. This guy's got, like, 20 squares, and it took 1 fucking square off him. I just don't get it. I'm trying my best not to sit here and just be like, oh, why? Because I did that on stream, and most of you have already heard me, like, incredulous at this game. Because balance is everything to me in a video game. It's what makes it tick. It's its life's blood. If you get the balance wrong, I don't want to play. It's so night and day to me as well. I can tell immediately whether or not I like the balance. And some games I can put up with it, but some games I really can't. And it's so frustrating. And one would think it's not a difficult thing to change. But this is working intended, according to the developers. This is what they wanted. And I find it really interesting, me guys, because there are people on this video in the comments that might defend this difficulty. I don't think they're going to watch the whole video, because if you made it this far, you're either in the drunking contest and you're pissed, or you care about the channel. Hey, we got Mustang mode. Oh no, we got full armor again. This has been a really, really good run for full armor. But this mode is so strong. It's easily the strongest mode in the game, because if it doesn't get you a roulette slash, it gets you a stun quick enough to do a throw move. But you will see people defend the difficulty, or people that say that they like it, or people will make the argument that this is difficult. And this is where I take issue. Because it's like the Dark Souls thing, you know. Dark Souls is the hardest game in the world if you've never played a hard game. And that's just the truth. I hate to rip the band-aid off, but I don't know anybody that's beat Ninja Gaiden 2 on Master Ninja that thinks Dark Souls is hard. I don't. Ooh, this is cool. So this is a kind of high-concept boss fight in space, and it makes a bit more sense than the other ones because there's more of a linear path to it. So the idea is the colour on his chest is the orbs that you need to kill. When you kill all the orbs on his wings, he's going to do like a big move, and you need to shoot the dome on his back. And if you're good enough at this, you can kind of do this pretty quick. These moves here, if you boost away from them as they're happening, you'll pull yourself out of that gravitational pull and you won't get hit. But I think that this one is one of the better space battles, actually. It's one of the harder ones because it's really easy to fail on this phase when he's kind of bombing you and making you rotate. But it's super... This is a fun one. I like this one a lot. But you're going to see a lot of people who think the difficulty's challenging. And I think it's misguided love, basically. I don't think that they really believe that. Because I don't know anybody that thinks having to whack an enemy 500 times that kills you in one hit is a fun paradigm. To me, it's a lazy paradigm. We didn't bother to make a difficulty, so you just die really, really, really quickly, and the enemies don't. And the reason I mentioned Ninja Gaiden 2 is because in that game it has this wonderful sense of lethality that not many games manage to nail. And it frustrates me that, because I love the philosophy behind the bosses in that game, in particular. Ninja Gaiden is a game about being lethal. And it's a game about the enemies being just as lethal, if not more lethal than you. However, it works because once you get better at it, you realise that Ryu is incredibly capable. And so is everybody he fights. In Ninja Gaiden 2 on Master Ninja, you can kill bosses in like 5 hits. Just think about that. This enemy here, guys, this enemy that looks a little bit like... I think somebody said that this was meant to be a Cooler reference from one of the Dragon Ball Z movies. Like Metal Cooler or something. And this is an homage from the previous games because this is a character you fought in those games. I like this guy a lot, and I like the boss that's coming up. But these enemies here, on this homage, have 10 times more HP than bosses in Ninja Gaiden 2 on the hardest difficulty, which is a game that if you've beaten that, you understand what pain is, because you felt it. And if you're one of those people that doesn't think Ninja Gaiden 2 is difficult, you are very good at Ninja Gaiden 2. Whereas No More Heroes 3, I don't think you need to be very good at this game to realise that it's not that difficult. I think you can approach it from a very analytical perspective to understand what's going on. And like, look at this right now. There are 4 enemies in this room, but none of them are attacking me. They're all essentially waiting their turn, standing around and not doing much. When they do attack, they've got about 2 to 3 moves. They might have a few more that you don't see. And all they're doing is standing there and let me beat them up. They're like a training dummy in a fighting game. So think about it, right? Enemies that are very passive, that don't really attack that much, don't really attack that quickly, don't really attack at all, and then when they do attack, they do the same 2 to 3 things that is very easy to avoid. Doesn't sound like the basis of a very difficult experience, right? And now think about it. Think about something like a ninja, an IS ninja in Ninja Gaiden 2. That ninja has probably got about 10 moves when you add up all his cheeky throws and his cheeky twists and jumps and bombs and things. Guy's got a lot of moves for a little man, and there's lots of them too, which makes it even scarier. They all attack you, seemingly at the same time, but I think there's an order in Ninja Gaiden. You know, one person attacks, and then once his cooldown's done, the rest can do it, have a go, and it's like one at a time, but it's quite quick. It feels worse than it is at times, unless you know what you're doing. And because they're surrounding you, they're all kind of waiting their turn, and when they're waiting their turn, they're probably going to throw something. And at all times, you're either being destroyed, or on the brink of being destroyed. That's difficult. When they hit you, they do good damage. They don't do insane damage, but they do enough. Sometimes they'll get you real good. And when you attack them, they'll block, which is frustrating, but there's ways around it. And then when you do attack them, you might cut off a limb. So this enemy that is aggressive, that is fast, that is like constantly on your tail, in a group, I might add, that when you attack them right, you can kill in 2 hits. And when they attack you, they can kill you in anywhere between like 2 to 5 hits maybe, depending. And this is all happening in the time it's took me to like charge my weapon on this game and swing. And then we compare it to this. I hit them 500 times to kill them. They hit me once or twice, but they never hit me because only Stevie Wonder would take a hit from an enemy that takes this long to swing and never does anything. Like, it's not the same league, guys. I think you could agree, right? We're not in the same league. And you can pick any action game. It doesn't compare. Like, let's even mention God of War, right? God of War, when it first came out, was a character action game that got heavily criticised by the elite niche forums of the other character action games. Particularly on the Phantom Babies forum, the Devil May Cry guys, right? It got shit on for being style over substance, for being very, very easy. And for people giving it a lot more credit than they perhaps thought it deserved because Devil May Cry didn't quite have the same fanfare, even though lots of people love it. You know, Devil May Cry wasn't quite as mainstream as what God of War went on to be in some ways. And at that time, you know, God of War was new, Devil May Cry was kind of established and perhaps smouldering in the background somewhere. So they didn't think that it was worth all of the accolades and all of the praise and all the things that people were saying. So they did everything they could to diminish it in many ways. And they took the absolute living piss out of it for being just mad easy and terrible and nowhere near as good as Devil May Cry. It's going to happen, that's the internet. You know, Reddit before Reddit existed. And now we look at what that difficulty was actually like. So if you watch God of War on God mode, God difficulty, the enemies are aggressive. They attack a lot. Especially God of War 2 on Titan. Those dudes are jumping at you the whole time. Jump attack, jump attack, jump attack, jump attack. Those cursed legionnaires, they're on your ass. And it works in that game because you can hold guard like you can in this game. And you can just kind of shut that shit down and then you grab one of them and start throwing them and before you know it, you're just looping grab and having a jolly old time. But if you don't do that, you are constantly getting attacked. And your opportunities to attack are quite small unless you know what you're doing. And then when they hit you, they hurt. And then when you hit them, they go down decently quickly, but, you know, they take a bit of a beating. And then you realise, even a game that the elitist people who liked the rival games at that moment thought was piss weak and easy baby mode, even that game is leaps and bounds more difficult than this game in its fundamentals. I love this fight, by the way, it's really funny. I haven't really had an opportunity to talk about it too much, but one thing I will say is some of his charge attacks have got a weird hitbox. And when I first started doing this to record it, I was dodging his charge, but then after a while I just couldn't do it. It kept whiffing, and I kept trading with him, and I didn't want to trade, so instead I decided to do some dodging and knock him down and whatnot. And this guy just got destroyed. Really fun boss though, I like this one a lot. But it's interesting, isn't it, that something is going to be called difficult because of bad balance, because of lazy metrics, basically. HP bars that have an extra 0 they don't need. Damage on you that has an extra 0 that it doesn't really need. But there is Destroyman, we took him out. We get to the wonderful Phil, which I dearly love. And we get to move on. And here's the thing, if you're having trouble with this game, I'm not saying that it's not a challenge. You know, I had trouble with this game. But I just want to put out there this perspective that there are better ways to do it. There's better ways for it to be done. I don't mind spending my time on a difficulty that I believe is worth it, that I believe is truly challenging. And when I'm doing a challenge run, that's my fault, you know? When I do a crazy run on a game, I've designed it. And you can't get mad when it's by design and it's your design, you know? Don't do it if you're not having a good time. So, right here, do you see the bones? The bones now are the most upgraded, I think, that they get. They've got horns on their heads, and they've got this black suit of armor with the double pauldrons. But they're the same enemy with the same moves. And I just, like, look at this. I don't get this game, guys. You see, coming back to that difficulty conversation, you know? Does this look like a particularly difficult situation? Nothing's attacking, nothing's dangerous, I'm at no risk. The only risk is them hyper-armoring through my moves that are ineffective and one-hit killing me. That's the danger. And it puts you into this interesting conversation of what real difficulty means. And I could write a thesis on this, I truly could, because difficulty to me is just, it's huge, it's all-encompassing, it's amorphous, it's ever-shifting and ever-changing. It's never static. And there are certain things that I personally really, really like and I find very satisfying. And there are a lot of things I do not like and find almost demotivational in how shit they are. And I think the biggest hurdle and difficulty to this conversation is that subjective reflection, isn't it? Some people, a good example is permadeath, we talk about this a lot. Some people really like the pressure of having to perform. Very recently, a guy called JTB did an amazing Resident Evil 4 run, where he did professional, no damage, all kills, single segment. And if you don't know what that means, guys, it means he did it in one attempt, with no mistakes, start to finish. And if you know anything about no damaging Resident Evil 4 on professional, which he did it on professional, you'll know just how challenging that game is. Resident Evil 4 is a challenging game, and you need to really understand it. And what that guy did, not only does that show a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge and a lot of skill, but it shows a level of consistency and execution that is really respectable. I've no damaged Resident Evil 4 on professional, it's on my YouTube channel. I had a lot of fun doing that. The idea of doing that single segment, I would not do, because it's not what I like. It's not my particular flavour of challenge. But he does like that stuff, and it's something for him. And this is where we get into this subjective conversation of what you find challenging, what I find challenging. And this is where the fun happens. I love that he's done that run, and I recommend you go watch it, because it's very, very cool. However, I have no aspirations or intentions of ever doing it myself. And usually, if I see a challenge run that looks really cool, I will immediately think about what I can do with it. Can I try it? Can I sample it? Can I do the same thing? Can I do something better or more interesting? Can I take what they've done and run with it? Because one thing that you'll notice if you start challenge running or doing any kind of difficult run is you start to get inspired. You get inspired by what someone's doing, and it makes you want to see if you've got it in you. And it leads to these communities being formed, and these people with these common goals of pushing games to the highest degree that they can. And you see that more so now. It's a lot more mainstream and contemporary in speedrunning, because speedrunning is kind of the I suppose you could call it the younger brother of challenge running. Because before people were doing things really fast, they were doing things in awkward and like stupid ways. And whereas challenge runners kind of are in obscurity right now underneath the surface, speedrunning is on everyone's television. It's very popular. More people know speedrunners than they do the idea of anybody doing any kind of challenge run. Especially if it's a challenge run with acronyms in the title, because people don't want to say the full word, so instead it just looks like Gafoofpaup, and you're just like, I don't know what a Gafoofpaup is! What the fuck is they doing? This is obnoxious. Like, go on GameFAQs and look at Final Fantasy VIII and see some of those acronyms when it's just like, Faftagasdubundudubwursnichnoff. Like, what is that? How am I supposed to understand what this guy's doing? And then you look on it, it's like, know this, know that, know this, know that, know this, know that. It's essentially just a detention of 0 mechanics, you will die now. But it's cool. And someone really likes it, that's why they did it. And that's a fundamental, isn't it? Making a game you love even more interesting by doing something that no one's thought to do or took the time to consider. And that's what makes it so good. But that's what makes the difficulty conversation difficult. Because is doing Resident Evil 4 no damage professional harder single segment than it is segmented? You could argue both. For me, I think it's way harder. Way harder. I think doing it on one checkpoint is nuts. I think the idea of segmented, you could get frustrated, you could struggle, but I think if you have enough time and if you throw yourself against it enough, you'll eventually do it. Whereas doing it all, one attempt, I think you could try for the rest of time. You might not have the willpower to do that. So for me, mentally and psychologically, I think single segment is way more intensive and way more difficult. And I would argue that. I would. And I'm arguing against my case here, guys, because I'm not a single segment guy. I'm a segmented guy. This video is segmented. The previous one was segmented. The one before that was segmented. That's where I shine. Fortunately for me, though, my ego isn't built on this. It's not built on you thinking I am good. I don't need that. And when you're younger, I think you do. So I think some people, if they were to hear this conversation and they're a segmented runner, I think they would get defensive. And I think that they would go and probably argue the merits of why they think it's more difficult. Because I think you see that a lot. Especially from young, passionate people that can sometimes come across as, you know, like set in their own way or arrogant. Ooh, I'm going to throw him. Here we go. I figured this mode out because my stream helped me. So now you're going to see me using the crazy throw mode a lot more. Which is really good. I think I actually saw Ruben do this. So if Ruben ever listens to this, which I don't think he will because he's too busy being a fucking successful YouTuber like a god. I learnt that watching your video, Ruben. So thank you. It was very cool. Isn't this a great example, though, what we've been discussing? This is a diversity enemy, an enemy we fought at the beginning of the game, and he's a different version of himself because he's a different palette swap, so he has way more HP. He is no threat, but I can't kill him because his life is so absurdly high. I'm using all of my tools and he's still alive. How can you argue this is good difficulty? To me, I don't even think it's a fight worth doing. I'm not even taking my fucking coat off. It's pointless. And this is another good example. So this is multiple of the I forget the name of these little crocodile things. They're called triple puts. So these are palette swapped triple puts and they're premiums. And then we have the platinum leopard, or leopardon is called. I don't know if that's meant to be a pun of something. And this fight's dog shit. I remember really hating this because I killed all three of these triple puts. And then I died on that guy and I had to do it all over again, and it's fucking tedious. And like, look at it. Look at this game, guys. Look at what's happening. 3 enemies jumping around doing nothing. This is Dynasty Warriors at this point. Only Dynasty Warriors has more moves. And you know what I'm like when it comes to Dynasty Warriors. I talk mad shit on that series, but Dynasty Warriors has fucking just frames. It has combos, it has juggles, it has absurd specials. This game has 2 fucking combos. 2 combos and a fancy glove. I just don't get it, dude. There's fucking dentists with more shit going for them. And this is the 3rd game in the series with less complexity than the first. It just... what were they thinking? It's mad, isn't it? It's so mad. And Suda said, apparently, that if this game gets the right attention, which I hope it does, that they might do another one. But if they're going to do another one, come on, guys. You've got to put it all together. You really do. We have to be able to change weapons. You have to give me different weapons. Weapons with different results and different bonuses. I want to be able to make my Travis different to your Travis. You have to give us more moves, you know? You have to change the balance. You have to make it so that fighting is satisfying rather than arduous. And you know what really does me as well, guys? You can't change the difficulty in this. You can't do it at all. And I think that might be kind of a Japanese thing, that, because it's an old school thing. Modern games, you can change difficulties on the drop of a hat because accessibility's gone mad. And I know that makes me sound like a horrible person that doesn't want people with disabilities to play games. That's not what I mean, guys. I think there's a difference between giving people the accessibility options to enable somebody who's disabled to play a game. And I think there's a huge difference between putting a bunch of things in a game that allows anybody to just turn the fucking game off. And it really irritates me, it does. Because I love the fact that games are getting better for people who have got a harder life than me to be able to enjoy the medium I love. But I hate the fact that they're enabling people who have nothing wrong with them to cheat. And it's happening a lot, you know. We've got these accessibility features that completely turn off everything that makes the game a game. And then at the end of it, you get the trophy, you get the achievement, you get the reward. And I'm sorry, but that's not how that should be. You know, if you're blind and the game has these features to enable you to play a little bit better and you can't do the hardest difficulty, too bad. So sad. You know, it sounds harsh, it makes me sound cutthroat, but I have the same attitude towards anyone. If you can't do the difficulty, work harder. You know? Think about all those GDCs we've seen with people who have disabilities that do amazing speedruns. You know, think of all these people that have disadvantages that do amazing things in games. If you want to do something, guys, you will do it. It'll just take you a little longer and you'll have to be twice as good as everyone else. But you'll get there if you love it. And that's what I like, and that's what I believe in. So that type of stuff really irks me, and I'm surprised considering how accessibility features have gone nutty with stuff like that you can't change difficulty on this. It's a very old school mentality. And on the one hand, I really like it because it means that you can't start the game on like the hardest difficulty and then trick the game into thinking you're on the hardest difficulty and then drop it down to easy, beat the whole game, and then on the credits as you're about to finish the game, you swap it to the hardest difficulty and you get the trophy. Shit like that really fucks me off, and it's fucked me off since the dawn of time. Because I make these videos to help people who don't have the time or the effort to put in all the work it takes to figure this shit out that I'm doing on these videos. And then I can just say, use this, use that, have a good time, use the items, grind a few levels, and have fun. And you can totally do that, guys. You can, at the start of this game, go into that time machine, grind that first boss into oblivion by every single ability, and then do the whole game as if it's New Game Plus. You can even do the difficulty in New Game Plus, and you will get your achievement. And you will save yourself a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of hair. Because it's kind of... It's unreasonable, I would call it, the demand on the player in this game on New Game Carolina Reaper. I don't know why I keep calling it Carolina. Because it's Carolina, right? But for some reason my brain wants to do it. But here is one of the more interesting boss fights in the game. It's super gimmicky and silly, but I'm not going to engage with it because I don't want to. So at the start here, if you go to magic and you put thunder on your sword and you attack the command list, you will skip all the RPG sequence and you'll get to the fight. And then they checkpoint you on the fight here, which is nice. And I haven't talked about that. The checkpoints on this game are good, but the inability to retry checkpoint quickly makes it pointless. What's the point in having good checkpoints if to get back to the checkpoint takes time? You know, it's like having your cake and dropping it. I don't get it. It boggles my fucking mind. And right there we got an invincibility on him, which was nice. But what I like about this fight is the concept of it. It's very high concept and big. I got another invincibility. That's nuts. I suppose I should talk about that as well. So, this enemy does 2 attacks. 2 physical attacks that you can get a Mustang dodge on. And the problem with them is, their hitboxes are dog shit. So you have to dodge them before they happen. See this? That's dog shit, guys. That's bad design. I don't want to dodge a ghost. I want to dodge the fucking hand. I want to dodge the actual guy. Oh, it winds me up. It really does. But as long as you know you have to dodge early, you'll be okay. And the 2 moves that you can get that off is the one he slammed then, the overhead slam, and then he does a hook. And on the hook, as soon as he starts moving, you want to dodge then. And if you do it correctly, you'll get the dodge. But if you try to dodge it visually and do it as you would in most games, you won't dodge it, you'll just get damaged. And to quote the... Look at it. To quote the mighty Dark Souls, if you ever played Dark Souls 2 with base adaptability, and you got used to trying to roll using your iframes and you kept taking damage on the end of the roll because it punished that, you'll know exactly what it feels like to dodge some of the perfect dodge timings in this game. You will dodge visually, it will feel good, your muscle memory from playing better games than this will tell you that it was good, and Travis will take damage. And it's just, it feels so weird. But as I was saying, the reason I like this fight is because of the scale of it. This to me is a traditional classic boss fight. It is a big platform for you to dodge around, and it is a big boss that is taking in turns to do high concept moves that you dodge in creative ways. And one of the compliments to this game I want to give it, in as much as every boss has 2 attacks, every boss has 2 million HP, and every fight's fucking boring, I really like that you do not have to dodge most of the moves. This game has some flexibility and some creativity on how you can avoid damage, and I think it deserves a big compliment for that, because not many games do. So the first thing you can do in this game to stop damage is to hold guard. When you hold lock-on this game, Travis will automatically guard, and he will protect himself against a ton of attacks, and it's way more than you think. You could probably block about 90% of this game and be absolutely fine. It's really, really effective. And then on top of that, you can use the Death Glove to shut down things and interrupt bosses that are doing things to stop them from hitting you, so you can dodge them without needing to dodge, which is really cool, right? And then the final one is something that is really, really appealing to me, which is the idea of what I'm doing right here, which is just dodging it visually. So there are a lot of engagements in this game where you can just walk around a move and punish. And I love that, because there's no roll stuff that I do on Souls games and Neo. And I'm doing it in a game that's not those games, which is really cool. So the idea of being able to just old school walk around the move and dodge it visually is really appealing. But keep on hitting this dude, big old chunks. He's got so much life though, hasn't he? And then we got the big wave, so at the corner of this wave you can walk around it, but you can iframe through it if your roll is good. This one is concentric circles. If you just roll through the first one, you can stand in the middle and you'll be fine. And then he generally comes here and does one of the hydro spins. So get past the hydro spin and attack him as best as you can. And this is a good opportunity to talk about death mode, I think. So there is a custom hardest difficulty that is exclusive to the time machine in the base, your HQ. And what happens is when you go on the time machine, you can replay every boss in the game, and you can replay them on any difficulty. And you have to do the lower difficulties to unlock the later ones, and then you have to pay a bit of credits for doing it. But when you do it, not only do you get currency, which is really, really good for grinding the moves and getting upgrades, but you also get components for building better chips. And when you beat Carolina Reaper, it will then unlock Death Mode. You cannot choose Death Mode for the game, because there is no traditional, Death Mode difficulty. Although I would have preferred it personally, because I think it sounds better than this difficulty name, even though I appreciate the joke. So what I'm going to do, guys, originally I was going to edit in the death mode bosses and do the walkthrough on Carolina Reaper. But I didn't end up doing that, so I think I'm going to record them separately. And as I said earlier, I'm going to go for no damage, I'm going to go for best rank. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get better chips, I think, to try and make them a bit quicker. I'm going to try and get some of the cool damaging chips and kick some ass. But speaking of kicking ass, this is my favourite boss in the game. This is a man called Henry Cooldown, which you guys have way more experience than I do, because I've never heard of this guy. And everyone who is a fan of the series is like, how can you not know this man? But this dude just reminded me of Bungie from Gungrave and Amon from Yakuza. And I also have a visual bug happening on my game right now. The game thinks I'm like constantly being sprayed by something green, so I have this strange particle effect generator on me. But this boss is really, really dangerous. He will fuck you up super quickly. And you have all the abilities you could possibly need to beat him up. And I recommend that you do so, because if you don't, he'll take you down with these ridiculous cleaves that he does. They also like to interrupt this fight quite a lot, which is kind of annoying. But here he goes with this crazy glowing eye nonsense. And then we get the next phase, and he's super close to me, so I do some blocking. There's his combo, there's his big slam. I only fought this guy about 4 times as well, so I didn't get a chance to learn too many of his moves. When I go back on death mode, I'm really looking forward to getting a super clean fight here, because I'm going to take damage on this fight from that. Did you see it? That's my damage. Everything else I dodge or get away from or just completely shut down. And again, dodging in this game is surprisingly difficult if you want to do it in a conventional old school fashion. But if you dodge early, you know, you get rewarded, and I really dislike that. We got a big combo here into another throw. That throw looked weird. Like a god hand throw. And then we get the charge to knock him down. We've got the full green mode. Interesting, is full green mode different to full armor mode? I've only just noticed that. There's another thing as well you might have noticed, guys. Every so often the bottom of the screen, like some image comes up and a hand goes towards it. Apparently that's the items, but I do it by accident and I don't know why, because I don't have any items and I've never used any. I'm really tempted to see if the food is good, you know, the damage food. You can eat a sushi that increases your damage output, and I didn't want to use items because it goes against the Devil May Cry player I've always been. But I'm curious if it makes a huge difference on the bosses, because if it does, I might use those on death mode. Because I just want to get it done, you know. I want to kill them, I want to dominate them. And then we've got the Swords of Revealing Light that you can completely shut down by doing a well-timed death kick. And then we're going to finish him off, hopefully, with the robot mode. The feedback on this robot mode is a bit shit. It gets super awkward. Is he done? And that's the end of him. There goes Henry. Gosh, that fight is so cool. It's a shame you do it in the hotel covered in dust. I don't know why the game looks so terrible on that sequence when it's such a fun fight. You should have fought this dude in a really cool place. Somewhere really epic, but instead, dirty, dusty, shitty street place that you've seen 500 times. Kind of sums the game up, doesn't it? Unconventional, unexpected, ugly. And then that takes us on to the final boss coming up. Another one of my favourite bosses in the game if the game ended at the first phase, but this game doesn't end at the first phase, and instead we get probably the worst boss phase of any boss I've ever fought in my entire fucking life. But before we get there, we have a couple of captain treatments. This guy's prismatic, and then we have those dudes over there which are the whole chests that are going to spam us the whole time, and this fight is really dangerous. It is so easy to not see a bomb off screen and instantly die, or just get pegged and get one hit killed by the dude with the axe. So you're going to see again, guys, as I'm going to apologise, you're going to see a very defensive encounter here, because everything kills you instantly, and this fight is long. But I'm looking forward to seeing the comments on this one, just from the people that like the channel, the people that have played this game, see whether or not you agree or not, and the people who like the games in general, to see if they felt the contrast. Because one thing I noticed on stream is one of my regulars said that this game felt way harder than the other No More Heroes. And I'm kind of curious if that's the thing, because it makes me wonder if they just fucked up the balance on this one a little bit, or if this one's just meant to be harder. Because if this is the hardest one, and it really is the hardest one, I think I'm going to have a lot more fun with the other ones, because I want to love this game, and I do like it. But there's so many parts of it that just needed to be better for me to love it the way I love the games I repeatedly go back to. And I'm really glad I got to play it, and I'm super overjoyed that the devs hooked me up. But at the same time, I can't help but feel like this game needed more. It really did. I don't think it has enough enemies. I don't think the enemies have enough moves. I don't think Travis has enough moves. I don't think there's enough features. I think the story's fucking stupid. And those people that are like, oh, you don't play No More Heroes for gameplay, you play it for story. I think you're insane, and I hope you don't procreate. Because it's fucking dangerous, dude. The idea of your kin and the world having more logical masterpieces like you is too scary to be perceived. Like, I can appreciate enjoying a slocky story. I can appreciate there's people that like the Tommy Wiseau movies and whatnot, but fuck me. Like, I just don't get it. I don't get. This is really bad too. The camera right now is... Could have learnt from God Hand, but nothing learnt from God Hand, so instead we have to suffer shit camera. It just seems weird to me. The whole play it for story when I thought the story was fucking stupid. That's all it was. It was just fucking stupid. You know? And now we finally get the 1v1. And the reason that I'm being so defensive on this enemy is because this enemy has an auto counter. So if you death kick him, he can just kill you instantly. So I'm going to wait for my cooldowns here, guys, but I don't have any chips to make them better. And I'm quite curious how good the chips that increase your cooldowns are, because the Death Glove is super overpowered. And again, if this game had have been what I wanted, and if it had been a bit more mechanically focused and clean, I would have done no Death Glove. I would have done no chips. I would have done no damage, best rank, you know? I would have done no upgrades. I would have really driven this game to the brink of what can be done. And I would have dominated it. Because I would have loved it more. And I would have took more pleasure in doing it, because it wouldn't have bored me, it wouldn't have frustrated me, it would have made me feel like it was badly designed. But alas, that's just not the future that we're in. But we did get some good news recently. Miles Morales comes out next month, and it's coming out in like 15 days. So I'm finally going to get to play the new Spider-Man, and I'm going to do a project for that, which is going to be super sick. We just got Uncharted on PC, Uncharted 4, and Uncharted Lost Legacy. Problem is, the mouse on it is absolutely dog shit, which I think is fucking delightful. Imagine waiting all those years for Uncharted to finally be on PC, and then they fuck up the mouse. Imagine! PC port for a AAA title from one of the biggest developers in the world, and the simple function of aiming is incorrect. It's a check that writes itself, isn't it? Priceless. Unbelievable. And then we also have Gotham Knights, which I'm going to be doing something with, but I don't know what it is. It might just be a bunch of shit posts. It might be an actual walkthrough. I guess I'll keep you posted on that. And I'd just like to take the time now to thank the people who really do watch these videos and go above and beyond just watching them. You know, the people that support me on Patreon. Patreon is really, really important to me at the moment for YouTube, because it's the thing that justifies doing it. It's a very difficult space to be on YouTube when you've fallen out of the favour, as I mentioned earlier. You know, you can make videos that you like and videos that you think are good, but nobody gets to find them, and YouTube doesn't share them with even the people that are subscribed to you. And you can have a lot of subscribers and still get very minimal engagement, even though the videos are decent. And I like to think my videos are decent. You can disagree, that's cool. You know, everybody likes what they like, and more power to you if you have a strong voice like that. But the biggest frustrating part is people not getting to see them. You know, you might have been subscribed to me for years and really like the channel, but you just don't get the video, so you don't know they're there, and they just get lost in that flux, and then they just don't get the attention that tells YouTube's algorithm to then put them out to other people. So instead of everybody getting to see them like the good old days where it just put it in your sub box and you could watch it or not, it's up to you. Now it doesn't even give you that courtesy. It's just like, oh, nobody engaged with this one, so we won't show it to everybody else because it's not a good video, you know, gauged by these metrics. Doesn't matter what time you put into it, doesn't matter the love you put into it, doesn't really matter what it is. But that's what makes it so awesome for the people that I thank at the end of these projects, because you're the reason that keep this going. And there are other reasons, of course. You know, when I do the premieres and people tip on the premieres, you guys are legends as well. You are literally keeping the lights on. And I really, really like YouTube, and I think I always kind of will. It's not one of those things where I feel like I'm slapping on a fake smile and forcing myself to do this. I'm actually still having a good time finding projects that I like and doing things for me. And I'm not covering as much as I used to, because it just didn't work for me, you know? And I feel like when you put enough time into something, if nothing comes of it, all you're doing is wasting your time if you keep doing it for no good reason. You can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. So when people do take the time to tip me, you know, to subscribe on like members and things, to go over on Patreon and pledge a certain amount, to come over on Twitch and say that I love the videos and I've been a fan for X amount of time, the people who do that are the reason why this continues to be in the format that it is. Because I've definitely been looking into other avenues. I've definitely been looking into potentially having my own website and putting my stuff on there. I've even looked into things like paywalls, because it just... the time that goes into this stuff is great if this is your hobby, but if this is the thing that you're trying to do to be your career, to earn your money, to help you live, the time versus the reward is just not comparable and not realistic. But I just want to say thank you to everybody that takes the time, especially right now when the world is, you know, we got some troubled times in front of us. The cost of living is definitely being crazy, and just a huge thank you to everybody that helps my life become easier by supporting what I love to do. And you might have watched this video and you might feel like I don't sound like I want to be here and I didn't sound too cheerful on this. Turns out talking to yourself for 3 hours is kind of tough, especially when you don't have too much to say, because the game is designed in such a way that you're fighting the same enemies you fought at the start of the game, but now they have 10 times the HP. This fight here is absolutely disgusting. The only reason this is even remotely challenging is because there's so many of them constantly attacking you and they don't die that you are going to fall asleep before you win. And this to me is No More Heroes 3's idea of difficulty at its ugliest and least interesting. And this final series of designated matches before the final boss are hard too. These matches take like 10 minutes and they're boring. So hopefully me talking bollocks will elevate this a little bit. And I've only mentioned DSP at least 2 times, so that's better for the people that hate him. But I have a Spider-Man project coming, guys. And it's a pretty big one too, I think you're gonna like it. And I think what I'll do is, if this video gets 2,000 views, I think I'll just release the Spider-Man project immediately. And the chances of that happening are incredibly slight, but if you want it to happen, you can, and you get to control that. And I like the idea of, if you're hungry to see what I've done with Spider-Man on the PC port, and you really want to see something crazy, you can haul that video and enjoy it, and hopefully I'll be able to release it a little sooner than I'd like, because there's going to be a few more videos on the channel at the moment, because it's good ad revenue now, guys. We're moving towards Christmas, where they pay a lot more for the ads. And I'm going to be putting out a ton of walkthroughs that I've made in the background and kind of held on to. So there's a nice variety of things that are going to be hitting the channel, hopefully. And then there's a ton of the new releases as well. And there's also a couple of standalone videos that I've made. So hopefully, if you're a fan of what I do over here, there'll be something for you to sink your teeth into. And if not, you can always come over to the streams and inspire me to do something that's closer to what you like. Because I'm always on the lookout for motivation and inspiration on projects. Because my biggest problem is not the will to want to do it, it's finding something I want to do. Like, that's the worst. And a lot of the times I come up with a good idea to do something and I really want to do it, and then I can't because something doesn't work right. Most recently, I got super into the mood to do Splinter Cell Double Agent. I have a lot of Splinter Cells on my channel. I don't have Double Agent and I don't have Conviction. I don't like Conviction, but I did get kind of hungry to do that, but the mouse and keyboard's fucking garbage and it runs like total dog shit. It runs like Gotham Knights on console. It's just not good. And when I went to Double Agent, I really liked that game. I've got a lot of history with Splinter Cell from those early consoles. I played it on PS2 and on Xbox 360, and I loved both versions, even though they're vastly different. But that PC port was one of the worst I've played in a while. It just didn't feel good. And I'd love to see somebody fix it and give it a contemporary control scheme and mod it and things so I could go and cover that game, because I think Double Agent's a really good Splinter Cell. It's not the best, but it's good. And I'm sure that there's a bunch of people that, like me, have got a lot of fondness for it, and you'd like to watch it as well. And I could do some, you know, cool, never get spotted, never knock anybody out, you know, never kill or anything like that. I could do some cool stuff along those lines and really bring something fun to the channel. And it'll be interesting that, because on Splinter Cell, I wouldn't do the editing that I'm doing right now, this emphasis on an aggressive editing style of getting rid of everything but the bare essentials, because in those missions, I would be able to just segment the missions and keep them as a whole. Whereas a lot of games that I'm coming to are games I've covered before, so I get to go in there and trim them away and make them a bit more streamlined. Like if I do Uncharted 4, because it'll be interesting, because if you don't know this, guys, I don't like Uncharted 4. I think it's kind of a bad game. And of course, objectively, it's an amazing game. It functions, people love it, it's beautiful, it's got a lot of money spent on it, and it's got, you know, good bang for your buck. All of that is fine, but to me personally, I don't like the mechanical changes, so I find it really tedious to play. But on mouse and keyboard, that might be different, because using a mouse and keyboard to me is really exciting. And I'm hoping it'll enable me to do some things I couldn't do on controller. And one of the things I'd love to try is to do brutal on the original Uncharted's without using the cover trick. And I have no idea if that would be even remotely possible, but if the mouse was good enough, I can be fast enough to maybe have a good shot at that and do something really crazy. But I suppose there'd be certain parts where I'd kind of have to do it, because there's some parts of that game where there isn't even good cover. What the hell would you do? But I like the idea of trying, you know. I like the idea of pushing myself and doing something cool. And people always enjoy my Uncharted things. Oh, I need to talk about that, guys. Did you see what happened just then? So this enemy here, I forgot the name of it. Is it called... I think it's called Diversity. This is, I think, the final tier of upgrades on the Diversity. He's got the blue face, he's tons of HP. But when he fires those bombs, if they stick on the ground, that is a bomb that will explode with a decent radius. And if an enemy steps in front of that bomb and you don't see it, you will die by being near him, because the bomb will just blow up. So be very careful. If any of these enemies stick one of those in the environment, it becomes a hazard. And these fights are so long and so difficult because everything kills you in one hit at this point. You go down super quick. And like, see it on that truck just then. If I'd not seen that, if I evade that way and it's off camera, I'll die. So be very careful. Like, this is a super scary fight too. Again, I'm fighting it in a very timorous manner. I'm not going in there and getting the perfect dodges, because at this point I'm fed up with the game. I just want it to fucking end. And it's a bit frustrating. But watch that curb as well. That curb has a collision problem too on high frames, so be conscious of that. Be super conscious of that. This is interesting too. Using the charge to hit people through geometry. It's actually a really good strategy that I haven't had any really reason to use up until this point, and then I can't get them to come close enough to me to use it. But it works both ways, guys, so be careful and don't get hit by them. And the only reason that I'm being so cowardly here is because of that platinum enemy. That dude who's trundling around, whose name I have also forgotten, he's called Minoru. The Minoru enemy can double hit you, and it's guaranteed death. I've never survived it. But it makes me wonder, it really does. You know, when an enemy is this basic, is there any real reason to give it this much HP? Because my mind goes to the idea... Oh, by the way, if you do Death Rain, it will destroy that thing that's stalking me right now. Whenever that parasite comes out of his face, the Death Rain will shoot it. So it completely neutralizes that as a strategy. You can actually bait this enemy into doing that facial move and then just hit it with horizontal attacks and kill it when it comes out of the mouth. But you need to be really careful, because if you mash dodge to get away, he might just poke you with his thrust and then pull it back and instantly kill you. That happened to me a couple times. But I kind of feel like an enemy that's designed to frustrate, i.e. shoot at you from a distance and be quite evasive, when you get close to that enemy, it should just shut down. It should just get absolutely demolished. But they don't do that in this game. You get close to enemies that are supposed to be crappy up close, and they just tank everything you do, and generally annoy. And I always think maybe there's a weak point I didn't find. Maybe there's some kind of mechanic I didn't stumble across. Because why wouldn't there be an effective way of hurting them? Like, can you imagine if your sword had 4 different beams? You could even map them to the colour of the death glove. And each enemy had a colour of the beam that they were susceptible to, and a colour of the beam that they were resilient to. And all you really did is straight up just, you know, attack them. Oh, I'm not doing great damage. Swap mode, attack them. Oh, I didn't get it. Swap mode. Oh, there we go. He's weak to this. And then once you remembered, you'd know what colour to swap your blade to for all the enemies. And you could even make it so that when they fired a projectile, their projectile was the colour that they represented, and you needed the opposite colour or something. There's so many simple things they could have added that would have enabled you to feel like you do more damage and enabled you to feel like you're thinking a bit more about what's happening. Like, look at this fight now. We've killed those guys that could shoot you from behind, and I am going to stun lock this enemy into oblivion, constantly knocking him down. Constantly looping him into this horrendous situation. This will knock down too. I didn't do it then, though. I fucked that up. So I'm going to have to push him down. Then I'm going to have to kick him, and I'm going to do it now. Jump attack. Oh no, charge attack again. Oh, it worked again. Damn. Sometimes that doesn't happen. But like, this guy can't do anything. And now I'm going to get my battery back, and I'm going to wait for my stuff to regen, and I'm going to engage him again. And he's just completely shut down. Remember when we were talking earlier, guys, about difficulty? About how some people say that this is hard? What is hard about knocking an enemy down 50 times who can't fight back? Like, this dude should just surrender. Can you imagine if the enemies could just surrender if you played too well? You loop the shit out of him and then you just white flagged and it ended the fight? That would be so cool. Every enemy has a different surrender threshold, and if you absolutely outclass them, they just bow, get on, they just prostrate themselves, wave a flag and disappear. It would be fucking sick. But instead we get this. And it would be so easily remedied by just increasing the player's damage by like 5 times damage. And then it would feel like a normal game. But maybe that's not what they wanted. Maybe they wanted it to feel like shit. And any game whose hardest difficulty warns you before you play it better be good. Because Mushihime-sama did that on Ultra, and Ultra is one of the most elegantly, insanely difficulties you'll ever play. And then this sequence here is kind of a cock tease, because this shows you what the game could have been like if it had more levels, and if it had actual sequences where you got to play as the robot a bit more. And this whole sequence here makes you feel quite strong in a game that makes you feel consistently very weak. So this is quite nice. It's just a shame it only had 8 enemies in the whole fucking game. Unbelievable. I wonder what the enemy variety is like in the prequels, in the previous ones. Something I'm going to find out, and who knows, maybe you'll hear me speaking on those videos and singing their praise. But now we get the final boss, guys. Now we get to fight Fu. And this guy is actually pretty difficult, because he has a gimmick where if you attack him at the wrong times, he has these automatically reflecting shields. Additionally, he has hard counters to your death glove. So if you use death abilities at the wrong time, they will not work. And if you try to do the death push on him, the death force, he just has a complete auto counter to it. And the auto counter is so strong that even if you stun him, he still automatically stops it. But the strategy here is simple, guys. We're going to wait for him to attack, we're going to dodge the attack, and then we're going to hit him as his shield goes down, and then we're going to do all our combos on him from a moment of weakness. I'm going to strategically... That reminds me of Akuma, what he did just then. I'm going to try my best to sneak in some death abilities, but every time you do them, he will respond, so be very careful. There's also a bit of a problem with Fu, where every so often when you're comboing him, he immediately recovers, makes you flinch, and then he grabs you. And you want to be really careful with that, because the amount of times I've been kicking his ass and he's recovered really quickly and just killed me, it happened about 2 or 3 times. And I only fought this dude, I think, 5 times. Because this fight's long, because you do no damage, and he's got a boatload of health. But it's very easy once you know how to loop him and put him down. But we're just going to Y-combo him a bunch. And then from here, I'm going to wait for his attack. There's his hair. You can walk around it. No roll, baby. And then he's going to come and try and whack me now. But his pathing's weird, so he does the hair again. So we're just going to no roll it. And then boom. 1, 2, and then sweep, and then attack him. And then we're going to hit him a whole bunch. And then from our combo, we're going to go into waiting for him to grab. And then we're going to punish him on the back. And then here, as soon as we get the slow motion, we're going to punish him the next time. And we're going to hit him with a slow motion. And then we're going to just hit him with everything. So this is his weird phase. You can kick this to completely shut it down. And then with slow motion. And I'm going to jump behind him so I don't push him out of the slow motion. And I'm going to beat the living piss out of him. But I'm running out of battery, which is a bit of an issue. So we need the throw here. So we jump in with the throw. This leads to a hard knockdown. We're now going to probably do a big combo on him. He's going to stand up right there. And then he's going to recover. We're going to kick him again. He's stunned again. And we're going to go immediately into more combos, into another throw. Do not combo him then too much, because if you do, he auto-recovers and just fucks you up. And then this is his big spirit bomb. Just run to the side of it and don't go near it because it has this expanding ball effect. There's his grab. Punish his grab. The reason I like Fu is because he actually feels like a boss. He's got a handful of moves. All of them can be dodged in interesting ways. This can be kicked. Go through it. Boom. See you later. And then it's always a stun because it's a hard punish. And then you want to bank some damage, slow motion, and then hit him with a big throw to get your shit back. Like, if more of the bosses were as cool as this one, I would have liked the game a lot more. And there we go, we got Mustang mode, which is really lucky. But again, be really careful, guys. If you come out of this, he just grabs through it. So right then, notice I ran away. I ran away because I'd learnt my lesson. And this is the one you can kick through. Insta stun, death rain, go into your combo, get your throw. And I suppose I should talk about the sequence coming up, but I'm going to talk about it when it's happening because it takes about 10 minutes and I hate it. It is easily the worst phase of any boss I've ever fought, and it's irredeemable dog shit, and I don't know why it exists. It's ugly, it's stupid, it's lazy, it's long, and it's lame. Ooh, we're in throw mode as well. I'm throwing the shit out of this dude. So fun. This guy got bodied. Absolutely bodied. See you later, Fu. Get wrecked. That was decisive, right? Well, this next part's not, so strap in, folks. This is... wow. So, the idea here is very simple. Fu is going to attack you through these mirrors, and he's going to stick his arm out, and when he sticks his arm out, you can attack it. But because this difficulty is horrendously balanced, even if you do a charge attack on his arm, you do almost no damage. If you try to use your death glove, you'll whiff because the detection's terrible, and this whole sequence is way longer than it needs to be. I have a couple of ideas to make this a bit better when I do it on death mode, but I'm not holding my breath because the whole fight is just... it's terrible. It's really terrible. And it's split into 4 phases. So the first phase is what you're watching here. The second phase is a fatter version of this hand. It's like a Bowser hand. And it's a bit more aggressive when it puts its arm out and it keeps its arm out a bit longer and you beat that up. And then the final 2 phases is this phase again and the Bowser hand again with lasers. You know those things that were really fun in that Lucy Love boss? Well, we've got them in this now. And it's just dog shit, really. There's no words other than that. It's so awful. And even if there's some tech here I didn't find where you break a mirror or something and it makes it really, really quick, even then, I don't know how this gets made. I think this room looks awful. I think the concept of this fight is awful. I think the fact that it has 4 phases when it's just 2 phases repeated twice is insanely lame and stupid, and I think the whole thing as an ensemble, after a really good boss fight, makes it leave an even sourer taste in your mouth. Because Fu was such a fun fight to figure out, and then this isn't even a fight. It's a war crime on your eyes. Like, this offends every concept of both visual art and mechanical game design. Like, this is almost... You know how they say that art is meant to be challenging, and it's not necessarily meant to be enjoyable? Well, when people say that, fuck those people. But additionally, this is everything wrong with what this is supposed to be. Like, if I wanted to be challenged, I would go and learn a language. Like, I'm supposed to be playing an enjoyable video game and fighting a final boss, not navigating, like, Jackson Pollock's dream journal. I don't get it. This is crazy, this. I'd love to talk to whoever made this, and then fire them, and then make sure that they're blacklisted and never work in this city ever again. Because it's just... I don't know. And I went online afterwards to see if I could find some sick strategies I'd not come up with, to see if anybody'd figured this fight out. And I just saw the same kind of stuff. I saw a bunch of people's playthroughs of people running around getting hit a lot and hitting it and taking a long time, and it just doesn't seem very good. You might be wondering how come I left in the super long one. The reason that I left this one in the walkthrough is because it's no damage. And I didn't think I'd be able to do this phase no damage because it's total dog shit. So instead, when I got here, I thought I was going to be here forever, trying to do it. And then I did it first attempt, and I was super happy because it's lame. I think we can all agree it's really lame. And when I go back in on death mode, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and dodge the arms. I'm going to try and get Mustang dodges on the arms, and I'm going to try and go ham on them and see if I can do a ton of damage. I think I'm going to take all of my chips off and stick them on like fast attacks or something. And I'm just going to see if I can do an absurd amount of damage there. Or I might put all my chips on slow motion after the dodge, so I can bank a ton of damage on that. I'm not entirely certain what I'm going to do, but I know what I'm going to do is, whatever it's going to be better than this. So, you thought this couldn't get any worse visually? It can. So now you have these lasers sweeping back and forth, and if you try to attack the arm when it pokes out, because Travis's movement is so erratic and because the collision on the enemy and you has an interesting relationship with each other, you end up attacking your way into the lasers if you're not careful. And additionally, the camera makes it so difficult at times to see where you are in relation to the lasers that this whole thing just feels like this giant clusterfuck of ugly, dumb, lame, uninspired design. And I don't want to be the guy that breaks this to you if you've not been paying attention, but this is the final boss. This is meant to be the most impressive part of the game, the culmination of everything that you've learned, the journey's end, the final confrontation, the denouement, and this is what we get. It's dire. It's so dire. The developers do seem to have realised that it's not good though, because the lasers don't do too much damage unless they direct impact you. But one thing that happened to me when I first played, which gave me a really bad experience here, is I was playing on normal with no health upgrades, and I did the first 2 phases to get to the lasers. And after that cutscene, when the lasers spawned, they spawned directly on me and instantly killed me by hitting me about 2 or 3 times before I realised where I was. And then I had to do the entire first 2 phases again. So my first experience with this fight was terrible. And then I did the fight, and it somehow got worse, and was somehow even lamer than I thought it was to begin with. So when it came to the prospect of recording it again for a walkthrough, I really didn't want to spend too much time here, and fortunately I ended up not. But I'm just curious to anybody that's made it this far, what do you think they were thinking this was? Like, can we see a point in this? Can we see a redeeming feature and a quality here? Because, do you know what this reminds me of? I'm going to go old school with this. This reminds me of a filter you could enable in Turok 2 in the multiplayer that turned all the surfaces into these weird colours like this, into like clown colours. And it was a really stupid modifier that no one really used, but it was just there because it was goofy and they gave you a lot of options like that in Turok. That's what this reminds me of. And it makes me laugh that a game that came out in, when was that, 98? A game that came out in 98 had a toggle to turn this shit off. And this game came out in 2021. And this is a feature now. This absolute, like, ocular atrocity. This visual vomit of colour and zero coordination is apparently design. And then the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop, is that super low-res reflection in the reflective tiles in the ground. They're fucking godlike. It's just so dumb. What a way to go out, guys. You've been here with me now 3 hours. And we're going to end our time together wondering what the fuck they were smoking when they did this. And wishing we had some too. Or wishing they didn't have any at all. Because then maybe we'd have got something good. Like, how did we not fight Fu in a giant robot in space? How did Fu not turn his, like, Cell Games platform into a giant goddamn battle station? And why did we not have a multi-phase, like, rock'em sock'em robots off? It would have been awesome. And the saddest part is there are credits in this game where you fight a giant robot and all you do is quick time events. And I feel like that should have been the final boss. And I have no idea why it wasn't, but it makes me deeply saddened that that's the case. But this is the final phase. It's the Bowser hand with lasers. I mean, it doesn't get much better than this, does it? This is the pinnacle of design, the pinnacle of artistic and mechanical richness. And I'm doing it in the slowest way I physically can because I don't want to ever touch this ever again. Ironically enough, I will be touching this again, and hopefully I'll have a really, really good strategy when I do. But I don't. Not yet, anyhow. Work in progress. I'm also tempted to release this in 3 parts too. Just to see how well it does, because I used to segment a lot of my videos. Segment them by chapters, and I really liked doing it that way. But then there was a certain thing that changed on YouTube where it didn't favour that in the algorithm anymore. But at this moment in time, I don't seem to be favoured in the algorithm at all. Unless you search for certain things. If you search for certain things that did well for me back in the day, I definitely turn up for those, which is nice. But it's so fascinating, isn't it, how search engines have decayed? Search engines now are essentially just corporate tools to help promote things that they're sponsored by, rather than giving you the results that you're looking for. They use them as an opportunity to advertise to you. They're really suggestion engines, they're not search engines anymore. It's kind of insulting, really. Can you imagine if you went to a restaurant with the intents of... You went to a pizza restaurant with the intents of having a delicious pizza, and they fucking brought you a bolognese? It's like, well, I suppose we're in the same country, but come on now. I wanted a pizza. What the fuck is this? It wouldn't work, would it? But on the internet, anything works, everything works. It's madness. Here's some bathwater. Here's some nice streptococcus. Pay for it in a large sum and then drink it, because of course that's a good thing to do. How would you do that? But look at this encounter. Look at this. Look how good this is, dude. I can't even say anything. It's just... It's funny. But I can say some things, guys. I can say thank you for being here. Thank you for watching the videos, if you do. You know, thank you for leaving comments, if you do. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for joining the streams. A lot of cool games coming out this year. And then in the coming next year. Be interesting to see where it leads. See how long we can keep the dream going, you know? But that's the end of Fu. And then we're going to move into now to the true final boss, which is really, really silly. It's an homage, I think, to a Super Smash Bros. Game that the developers made. And you have to get the boss to 100%, and he gets you to 100% in 1 to 2 hits, whereas you do 0.01% damage every hit. You have to hit this guy a lot, and the perspective is really stupid. This whole sequence is just fucking dumb, I don't really get it. But I like to start by throwing him down, and then I kick him, then I freeze him, then I rain him, and then we're going to go in with some combos, and we're going to see what we can do. But you have to hit this guy so much, and immediately I get Mustang mode, which is nice. But it's just so biased towards him. He does this move where he goes into the air and he fires spikes down. If they touch you, it does 100%. And your damage is just so weak by contrast. It's really absurd. And we've got the weird bug here that happens sometimes. Every so often you can get stuck on a ledge there. Sometimes it happens to you, sometimes it happens to him. It's certainly interesting when it happens. I don't really know what causes it or why it happens, but it does. Here we go. Come on now. Get that stun. I do like it when Travis keeps shouting fuckhead though. It's so immature and stupid, but it works. As opposed to like DMC's cutscenes where they were cursing at each other and it all felt forced and stupid. Whereas in this game, you feel like Travis is just swearing. And you feel like it's absolutely what he usually does. Like, he's not swearing for anybody but himself. Now we get the robot to try and finish him off. How much damage does this do? Is it going to do 6%? Really? So once he's at this, you need to hit him once and you'll trigger the deletion. And that's the end of the game, guys. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And most importantly, you take care now.